talking about aliens, UFOs, and the unknown. The talk show is buzzing, the excitement grows. Exploring the mysteries that the universe holds. Get ready to dive into the world of the paranormal. Welcome to the Coley and Marquise show, where we uncover the secrets that nobody knows. From aliens to UFOs, we're ready to explore. Strap in and get ready for a wild ride for sure. Fearless and bold, not afraid to ask questions that challenge all we think we grasp. Every episode brings a new cast to uncover the truth beneath the mask. Believe in the unbelievable. Open your mind. Welcome to the Coley and Marquise show, where we uncover the secrets that nobody knows. From aliens to UFOs, we're ready to explore. Strap in and get ready for a wild ride for sure. Welcome to the Coley and Marquise show, where we uncover the secrets that nobody knows. From aliens to UFOs, we're ready to explore. Strap in and get ready for a wild ride for sure. Welcome to the Coley and Marquise show, where we uncover the secrets that nobody knows. From aliens to UFOs, we're ready to explore. Strap in and get ready for a wild ride for sure.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to
Hey.
the Coley and Marquise show. What's up, Coley?
It's great. I love that we switch platforms. This
Yes,
is so much
guys,
better.
We have switched to a new platform for our streaming services. We're now using StreamYard, and let me tell you something. It's awesome. It's actually pretty awesome that we switched to StreamYard. So, but before I do that, let me just do my quick intro because we do have a guest, and I want to kind of introduce our guest and then talk about some things first. So, as I said, we are streaming right now on Helix Rock Radio. We're streaming live at rockradio.live. That's where Helix Rock Radio side of things is. You can also join the conversation in the YouTube chat at Dimensions of Reality Podcast. That is Dimensions of Reality Podcast, all one word. Join the conversation. Hit us up in the chat. Catch us on Twitch at The Coley and Marquise Show. We are also, yes, we're finally live on another platform, Twitch, and soon, Coley and chat, we will be live on Twitter or X. We just have to get there because we got to be premium members, and I'm not sure how beneficial it would be to be on X anyway. At this point, it's pretty toxic. But you can find us also on Twitter at Coley Marquise, all one word, 2 L's. Coley, forgive me, I'll fix it eventually. Today,
Oh, I've got one too.
I will fix it. I will fix it.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, I have one that has a couple thousand followers on it already.
Really?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, you know what? What's hit up the chat with that. Can you post in the chat and the YouTube
Yeah.
chat what that is and tell us
Definitely.
what your esteemed Twitter page is.
Oh, mine's at Coley UFO. And let's see here. I know mine has close to 40K, but I thought we could switch it over to that one even. Oh, I do
It's a
have
great idea.
40K.
Yeah,
Yay.
it's a
Yeah,
great
we could
idea.
do that. We could do that.
Wow.
Mhm.
Wow. Congratulations on your 40K. Big shot. All right, big shot, Coley.
How I got it there, but yeah.
Today we have with us Daryl D. James. He is a former U.S. Navy serviceman who was recruited into the secret space program, of which I have many questions, and I'm sure you all will too. I know Coley does. So he'll be sharing his incredible journey from the Navy to becoming a pilot in, I guess you can say, a Solar Warden program, and it's very, very interesting and extraordinary experiences that he's had along the way. You guys are going to be really blown away by this. And listen, this is the first time I've interviewed anybody who has the history and the experiences that, Daryl has. By the way, Daryl has my dad's name too. I do want to say what's up to the chat. I see you all in the chat. You lurkers too. I can see you lurkers in there. We can't see you, but we know you're there. If you're hate watching, thank you. That also shows us love because it helps the numbers and the algorithm. Hate also is helpful to the channel. I want to say what's up to Scott Rosen, our very first chatter, Timoth Man. What's up, Timoth Man? Just leave it on YouTube, guys. We need the links ahead of time to share and promote. Yes, Timoth Man. Now that we're using StreamYard, check it out. I'll be able to post pre-show, the pre-show link, so we can share that we have an actual live coming up. Right now, well, before today, we've only been able to post it like at the moment that we're actually doing the show, or at least say, hey, we're going to be on this platform. Now we can actually post a link that is like the pre-link, the saved, pre setup for the show in the future. So that's freaking awesome. I'm really excited. It is paid, and I will say right now, thank you, Scott Rosen, because you essentially have supported the funding for that. Anybody else who wants to give us some love, you can always show us love in the chat on YouTube, and of course, you can follow us on Facebook and send some love on Facebook too, and platform XHead. Coley UFO, is that what it is? Coley UFO, right?
Oh, Antwix, yeah. I'll put that in the chat too. I put ours on there, but we're gonna switch it over to the Coley UFO one. So the name will go to well, I'll update this week. But yeah, I'll gladly switch that over.
Thank you, Coley. Woo Riders, what's up, Woo Riders? My gosh.
Woo Rider,
what's up,
Derek?
Welcome to the show. Bushi Bato. What's up, my person? I don't know who you are. I can't see the logo there, but Bryson, my guy Bryson. What's up, Bryson? Glad to have you in the chat. And everybody else, like I said, you lurkers too. So we are going to bring on our guest, Coley. You ready?
I'm ready when you are.
All right, let's bring on Daryl.
Yes.
Daryl, how you doing, sir?
Good. How are you doing tonight?
Fantastic. It's great to see you, man. It's really good. After reading over your bio and checking out your socials, I have questions. But before I ask my questions, why don't you tell us about yourself and what you want to talk about here tonight?
Oh, well, I joined the Navy in '99. I was in battalion, NMCB-7, construction battalions. I spent 5 years in battalion, and then after that, I was transferred over to St. Mawgan, England in 2004. And then I volunteered for the United States Navy Secret Space Program.
That is awesome. I read a book on the Secret Space Program, my very first book on the Secret Space Program. And this is the thing that gets me about this whole Secret Space Program. When I first heard about it, I thought it was ridiculous. But then last year, I believe it was last year, I saw Lou Elizondo post a suggestion that there is a person that he is aware of that went through his father's documents, and after finding out some things about his past, namely that he couldn't remember some of his childhood, that there was a chunk of his childhood that was missing essentially, and that some of it had to do with the military of some kind, and it had to do with, I believe, a space program, working with this space program of some kind. The details are, kind of scarce. They didn't really go into too much detail about it, but it was interesting because that was kind of the thing that made me think, oh my gosh, like there's a secret space program. So what is that? I mean, from your experience, what is the secret space program?
In my experience, the secret space program, I would say it's probably I'm sketching the details. I asked why we deal with like other ETs and things like that with my executive officer, and he just said we have a contract. So as far as what I remember what it was for, it was like a joint task force with mostly positive ETs. And it's almost like, I don't know what you'd call it, almost like they call it Solar Warden. So it's almost like a way to guard the solar system, I guess you would say, our solar system from more negative ETs. We're starting to regain control of, our solar system. We've been under, he's called it satanic rule for hundreds of years. And we're starting to finally get out of that kind of mindset.
Hold on. There's a lot there, Daryl. So the first thing is satanic rule. Multiple different ET intelligences. You say extraterrestrial. Are there interdimensional, or is it just extraterrestrial?
I mean, I would call it interdimensional. It would also be like other universes as well. I believe he said there's 8 different universes we know of, but there's only one kind of faction or group that knows how to get from universe to universe. Like, we don't have that technology. I don't think anyone in our technology really has that anyone in our universe has that technology as far as going to other universes. But yeah, there is like other beings we know from a different universe that do have that technology that have visited us.
Should we be afraid?
I mean, he acted like it was something positive. He acted like it was beings that were trying to help us out. The reason why we're able to win this kind of conflict with our own world is because of these outsiders granting us some of their technology.
So there's a race of beings that has a negative influence on humanity and an agenda that's not conducive to our development.
Yes, I would say so. It's primarily like reptilians. Living in our Earth, there's a lot of reptilians, elongated skulls, grays, things like that. And I'm not saying all of them are negative, but a large group of them are very negative.
I mean, it's just like our world, right? We have human beings that are part of different cultures that are, the culture themselves tend to be quite negative, but the people themselves are diverse. You can't say that all reptilians are bad because they're just as diverse as we are, essentially.
Pretty much. I mean, other reptilians have been taken over by something called the Draconian Empire. And so they were maybe more of like a peaceful kind of reptiles to begin with. They might eat people or something, you know what I mean? They might feed upon us if we're in the way, but it's almost like a force of nature, like you would think an alligator or something like that. But then there's also like draconians, and they actually feed off something called like loosh, which is like fear and suffering and pain. So they actually try to like, they start these wars, these conflicts between us, and it's almost like a way for them to kind of feed off of this loosh. And they live in like the 4th density, like we're the 3rd density. They live in the 4th, which is kind of like astral plane, spirit world type thing.
I've heard of something similar to this from David Icke. Is there some similarities to that scenario?
I mean, I've seen I remember seeing the kind of like the reptilian shapeshifter thing that he talked about. But one of the guys came up to me in the barracks one time, and he said that there's some sort of somebody told him about some sort of technology that can take the consciousness out of a being. But it has to be done before puberty for some reason. But they can't be too young because the body's mostly sedentary because it's used like a vehicle almost. And so they extract the consciousness out, the soul, whatever you want to call it, around 9-10 years old, right before puberty. And then something else can inhabit that being. And that's what happened to Michael Aquino. He's like a famous Satanist. He started the Temple of Set. He was with Anton LaVey in the Church of Satan back in the 70s with like Sammy Davis Jr. and things like that. But yeah, I saw the true form of Aquino. He claimed that he was once worshipped in ancient Egypt. He was a god of some sort. That was something else I was told. They used to walk among us, and we worshiped them like gods at long ago. And then there was some sort of war, and they signed some sort of treaty where they lost the war, and they had to go underground, and they've been infiltrating like our religions and the schools and things like that. But yeah, at first I saw like a black reptilian with like a red hood and a red cloak. And he said, like, don't you remember me, Daryl? Because I'd met Aquino before, and I didn't know what he was talking about. And then I kind of saw like 2 images kind of blend together. and I saw the reptile kind of walk into the back and the shadows, and then it was a Kino in front of me. So that's what I kind of think is like the reptilian shapeshifter thing. It's almost like a trick that they can do that I guess some people can see, but others can't. And yeah, it's just his consciousness, this reptilian's consciousness or soul, is actually inhabiting the body of Michael Aquino and using it almost like a vessel, you know, like an avatar, I guess you would say. And that's kind of like what it seemed like.
So there's two things that I'm getting here, and help me out because I'm conflating these two things. The one ability is to shapeshift. Another ability separate from that is to inhabit the body of another person, the consciousness of another person, to control that. Correct?
Yeah, and also give the appearance of kind of like a shape-shifting kind of illusion, I guess you would say. I don't think I've ever seen the actual shapeshift itself. I think it's just like some sort of an illusion that's probably a fourth density kind of, like I said, spirit world thing where they can play tricks on us. And I don't think it's actually the body itself changes and kind of grows a tail and scales and things like that. I think it's more like an illusion where they can kind of, a fourth density being doesn't have to show itself to you. Like if they don't show themselves to you, you can't. Most people can't see them, but some can. And I guess I'm one of the people that can see it. But for most people, unless they want you to see them, you can't see them. And I think that's what it is. I think it's just like some sort of a trick they can play.
So are they picking people like at random, or how? Like, what is their whole when they do? Like just influence a person, or what is their point, I guess, in doing this?
And inhabiting another body, or just influencing us in general?
No, if you said that in the fourth dimension or whatever, that when they inhabit a body, it's not really like they're taking over the body, right? Or they are taking over the body.
Well, it's like an empty vessel. Like the body of Aquino, when nobody was in it, like one of the guys told me, like, and the command was kind of, I guess, telling them to ask me things to see if I had memories of the program. I guess it was kind of like two factions on the base. It was like people who were asked to join the program and refused, and people who joined it. And the ones that refused kind of kept tabs on the ones that joined it. And they would ask you questions like, have you ever heard of reptiles before? Or have you ever heard of this before? And anyways, he was going to the underground base to do a 12-hour shift. He walked past the break room. He said he saw Michael Aquino sitting in the break room. He did a 12-hour shift. He came back, and he said he was just sitting in the same exact place, just kind of staring at like a blank TV that wasn't on. So for 12 hours straight, he didn't move. So it's like the body is kind of like an empty vehicle. And because there's no soul or consciousness in it, and until something actually inhabits it and animates that body, which is like this reptile, then, it just stays stationary. And it does have to do something with bloodlines as well. Like you have to, like, that person has to be from a certain bloodline, probably came from a satanic family, and they, basically sacrificed their child for this reptile, whatever it was.
Sorry, there's an echo there, but that was on my end. That is a lot. So does the Catholic Church have anything to do with this activity by chance?
I mean, I was telling, I bring up Robert a lot because before I left the command, I talked to him, and he told me pretty much everything that he knew. And I basically told him this base should be burned down. I was like, if people knew what happened on this base, they'd burn the place down. And he said, if you think this is bad, you should see the catacombs of the Vatican. And he said the catacombs of the Vatican is like flooded with reptiles and elongated skulls and things like that.
I'm not surprised.
Can you give me an example of an elongated skull? Like, would it be a human, look like a human, or are you talking about like an actual ET?
Well, I mean, a lot of people, like in places like Africa, do skull binding and things like that. And I think my own opinion of that is there were probably actually, the Egyptians kind of wear the long hats. A lot of the cardinals in the Catholic Church wear the long hats. I think a lot of the pharaohs and leaders way back when were probably elongated skulls, and maybe that's how they, covered it up. But you could find them like in South America. There's a lot of them in South America. They all have red hair. They have very large eye sockets and very large teeth, like big molars. And I saw one, and he had like a very long, broad jaw with very big, like blue eyes. And it looked like a red scarf wrapped around his head. I really couldn't tell if it was his actual hair or like a scarf wrapped around his head, and he had like a long like cone head. And the difference between like skull binding and an elongated skull is they actually have like a larger brain capacity. It's not like you just smush the skull; it's a larger brain capacity.
It's interesting. There was an African village where they elongate their skulls, and it's some kind of tradition that they do. And I always found that very odd. Like, why would they choose that form, like to just lengthen the head of a person? And they did it like how the pharaohs would kind of have those elongated, heads as well. Again, I'm not averse enough to know the history behind why they do that, but it is interesting that they would it seems like they're emulating something, maybe an ancient god. I don't know. Maybe the chat can hit me up with the details on that one. So there's influence from these negative beings, and we're in communication with positive ones to help repel these negative ones off the planet, or at least to get out of the influence. There seems to be there's a war, or some kind of conflict, it sounds like, but the conflict hasn't bled its way out to the general public. Can you give us an idea of how the conflict works?
ET warfare in general, I guess you would say, is like a lot of time travel, cat and mouse, kind of going back and forth in time, trying to affect timelines, change timelines, things like that. It's mostly a Cold War in the sense that it's not, a constant all the time war. Neither side, I don't think, could afford that as far as just actual numbers. But it's an on and off kind of battle. Peace treaties are signed. They're kept for so many years. Then the peace treaties are broken. Then another Cold War starts. That's kind of like how it works. And it's just basically, I would just say, kind of like the positive and negative of just the universe itself. I don't really higher density beings really don't have the concept of good and evil, I guess you would say. It's more like positive and negative. Like one can't exist without the other. It's like you need both to connect the current to create it. So it's like you can have a world that's actually more positive, or you can have a world that's more negative. But there's always going to be a little of both.
So kind of like they believe in a symbiotic relationship with these positive, negative, or these forces, these opposing forces. There's a symbiosis that it creates. It always frustrates me, but I respect it. I understand that idea, and I have to respect it. It's just the nature of the universe or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just you need both. It's just the way it is. You need light, and you need the sun. You need the moon. You need light and dark. You need a man and woman. You need It's just the way it is. It's the duality of the universe.
So there's. Sorry, go ahead, Coley. Go ahead.
Oh no, I'm just kind of want to back this up. So you were a part of the military. You were at the base, and then you got out of the military. Is that correct? Like your time?
Yeah, I got out, but before I got out, you get to see like the master chief of the base, the executive officer, and the commanding officer when you're getting out of the military permanently. And it's just like a tradition where you can pretty much say whatever you want to them as far as critiquing their command and things like that. You can't threaten them, but you can call them a jerk or whatever, and it's like you can't get in trouble for it. It's kind of like this tradition they do in the military. And I saw the master chief of the base, and it just kind of went over. And then I saw the executive officer, and he stood up really slowly, and he looked kind of sad. And then all of a sudden, he just appeared at the end of his desk. And I didn't have any memories. It's like I joined the program probably the third week when I got to this command, but then I had an additional 2 years on this command. And
so is that when they asked you, like, are you interested in the secret space program? And I mean, did you know what it all entailed? Because if you're going to, I just can't imagine. Like, can you walk me through that? Because I read in your thing that you have a high IQ, which is, which I did too. As like the gifted programs, but those were the people that they kind of pinpointed for the secret space program. So
yeah, I can kind of take it from the beginning if you want. I mean, we have time.
Okay.
It would be, I got to the command, and it was like my first week there, which is really strange. And I only had a secret clearance. I didn't have a top secret clearance. I can handle crypto for like radio packs and things like that, but I didn't have a top secret clearance. And somebody came in and said, you have to escort some civilian workers from the corporation Siemens into the underground base. So I went to the quarterdeck, which is kind of like the lobby of the base. You know, it's like where you check in before you go on vacation. You check out there. There's a logbook and everything else. And there were sliding glass doors that led to an elevator that led to the underground base. And there was also outside of the quarterdeck, there was like a 10,000-ton blast door. It was, I don't know, probably 15 feet high by like 10 feet wide and 4 feet thick. And it needed like a separate wheel, kind of like a railroad track, to keep the door from being pulled off the hinges. And it could handle like a near hit from a nuclear weapon. And yeah, they walked through the sliding glass door, and there was kind of like almost like a metal detector you would see like at an airport or something like that, or any, you know, it had the rectangular sides and like a top, and there was a little hump at the bottom with the black and yellow caution tape to step over it. And the first guy from Siemens, there's 3 of them. He said, I'm not walking through that bloody thing. So I thought, I don't want to walk through it either. So I went to walk around, and there was a guard, and he said, no, you walk through. So I just walked through it. I watched him fix a pump, and that was it. And I had to be led by somebody else with a higher clearance than myself. So I thought, like, what's the point of this? It didn't make any sense to me. And then I had a like 0000 to 4 a.m. watch, like midnight to 4 watch, which is like the, you know, the watch nobody wants on a Friday. And
yeah,
I saw Mike Lucchino there, and he was in his uniform. He's a colonel. You know, he has like the turned up eyebrows. I saw him on Oprah when I was a kid, so that's how I knew him. You know, he was during the whole satanic panic thing. There was a thing with a base called Presidio in California, where these kids claimed in the daycare center that they were being led down like a basement through a tunnel, and they wound up in Aquino's house. And he got accused of like child molestation and all this other stuff. And he started the whole expression satanic panic, which came out in the 80s, which is kind of like you can dismiss people. You call them a conspiracy theorist, things like that. They know that, you know, the people in general will just dismiss something if you add like, you know, a phrase to it like that. And so I saw him, and he was looking through paperwork. I think he was probably looking through whatever that machine did, like scanned me. And I just introduced myself, and I talked to him for a little bit. And I was like Rover Watch, so I just went on another round around the base and, you know, walked around the base. And then I had another 0 a.m., 0000 to 4 a.m. watch on another Friday. And that's not common at all unless you get in trouble. And there was a first-class petty officer of the watch there. He's a heavyset guy with a blonde mustache. And he pointed at the computer screen, and he said, what do you think about that? And he showed me like a picture, it looked like, of your stereotypical kind of gray. It was black and white. And I said, did you get that off the internet? And he said, no, look. And by those sliding glass doors, there was like this big window that stopped like 6 inches from the ceiling, 6 inches from the floor. And it was like a separate room. And there was just like this gray behind it, it looked like. And he said, do you mind if it comes in here? And I said, does it mind if I stare at it? Because I didn't know if it was like an animal, like if I looked at it too long, would it attack me? I had no idea. Like, you know, I never really followed this kind of thing. And it, you know, he said, no, it doesn't mind. It walked out of that room. It came through the sliding glass door, and that same guard was there behind it. And that, you know, that said, no, you walk through the scanner, the one I saw before. And it had a pistol in its hand, looked like a pistol. Wow. And it was coming at me, and I just got back from Iraq, and I said gun, and I stood up and I yelled gun, gun, gun. And then and they all said it's not a gun. Like, it was, I could hear it in my head. It would say things in my head, like, I don't mind if you look at me. Like, it said that. I could hear that. And then it held its hand out, and it said it's not a gun. And it was this very calm, monotone kind of voice in my head. And
can you describe what it looked like physically? Like,
yeah, what was it?
Yeah, it wasn't gray. It was like a light khaki brown, kind of, with like a hue of pink about it. It had big black eyes. It had like a fold of skin going from its tear ducts down to its cheekbones. No nose, small mouth, no ears. You know, no nipples, navel, genital. It was just smooth. And it had very long fingers. Like, it looked like it had to kind of hold its hands in C shapes when it walked. Otherwise, it would have drug its fingers on the ground. It had long palms and long fingers. And it was carrying like this silver pistol in its hand. It had no fingernails, or toenails, anything like that. But it had 5 fingers. Other people say they always have, but it had 5 fingers. I remember that. Long, spindly fingers, big knuckles. Kind of gave you like that, like when you see a spider kind of feeling. They gave you that creepy big black eyes with the long fingers. It was like, I don't know, 2.5 feet tall, probably maybe 3. Walked very robotic, very quick. It stopped abruptly. When I said gun, they all said it's not a gun. And I remember the guard that I saw before, he didn't have his weapon pointed at me, but he had it at the ready, like in his hands. It wasn't on his shoulder anymore. And I realized it was like for me, it wasn't for it. So I just sat back down. Yeah, and it wasn't a gun. It was like a drill. And there was just this crappy like Dell computer, like government issued Dell computer on the ground. And it took it apart like a machine. Like it didn't have to guide the bit in. It just hit the screw every time. And it was catching all the screws with the other hand. And it slid the top, it did the side, did the back, went to the other side, did the other side, slid the top off, popped out 2 gigs of RAM, put it on top of the table. There are 2 more other gigs of RAM waiting for it, grabbed it, popped them back in, slid the top on. It still had the screws in its other hand. And it was able to kind of flick its wrist and set the screws every time between its fingers. And it just flicked it and then put all the screws back in almost as quickly as it took it apart. And then it just stood there in front of me. And, I kind of went like that, and it turned its head for me, and the other way, and it turned its head, and I looked at its hands, and it moved its hands back and forth for me. And it was almost like it was just there so I could observe it. And I remember in my head, I said, "Do you mind if I touch you?" And it didn't say anything. So I leaned to touch it because I wanted to know. It was like, this is unreal. I wanted like some sort of physical contact. And the petty officer of the watch said, "Don't touch it." And I got kind of bored with it, and it just walked back, into the sliding glass doors in the underground base. And I was pinching myself, I remember, with my, my thumb. I was sitting down pinching my thigh with my thumb and my finger as hard as I could. And he said, "Do you think you're dreaming?" And I said, "No, I want to have a mark in case you, erase my memory so I'll remember this. I want to have some sort of mark." And he said, "Well, you'll remember this, at least for now." And then he said, "You're smart." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, like really smart." And I said, "Well, how smart? Like 140, 150 IQ? And he said, "More like 190, 195. And he pointed at the computer screen and he showed me like these color-coded lines that kind of went up and down. And he said, "See, you're the second smartest guy on base." And I was right below the top one. And then there was like a gap. And then there was like the rest of the guys, all these different lines. And he said he was saying things to me like, "You smoke," because I smoked at the time. And he said, "But you don't have any clots. That's because you drink." And I said, and because I drank at the time. And he said, I said, "How do you know this?" And he said, "You see that scanner you walk through?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "It tells you everything. It gives you a complete scan of your body. It tells you your IQ. It tells you if you have any clots, if you have any kind of physical ailments, anything like that." And these guys had to walk through it every time they went to the underground base. And and then he started asking me things like, "Do you have any hobbies?" And I said, "I used to play classical guitar." And he said, "Oh, they'll like that." And I said, "Who's they?" And he goes, "Well, there's Germans up there." And I said, "Like up where?" And like, "You mean like space?" Because I just saw this thing. And he goes, "Yeah, I guess you could call it that." He really didn't refer to it as space. But he said, "They're in the moon and beyond. Like there's there's like the moon's hollow. They live in the moon and they live beyond." And he said, "There's other things out there too." And he wouldn't really tell me what they were. And he was just asking me all these things and if I had any hobbies and all that. And then he said, they're going to want you. You have a high IQ. And I mean, that was pretty much the end of that night. And then on Monday, the XO came to my workstation, which was like a garage. And he wanted to talk to me. And that really never happens. They might ask you to their office, but they never come to you, come to you. And you might go to where they work, but they never come to you. And at first it was small talk. And then once we got further enough away from the garage, it was, he said, "What did you think?" And he was asking me about what I saw. And he started telling me about, he asked me if I ever heard of Project Solar Warden. And I said, "No, sir." And he said, "Well, you ever heard of the United States Navy Secret Space Program?" And I said, "No, but I think I could figure that one out." And he said, we have this program. It's called the 20-year and back. You do 20 years. We send you back in time 20 years. When you're done, age regress you 20 years, wipe your memory, and you wake up in bed like nothing happened.
I heard
then
Tony Rodriguez talk about that also, the 20
Yeah,
years. That's interesting.
Literally was,
yeah.
And he told me all about this stuff. And he said with my scores, I could become a commander a rank of commander, and become a pilot of a 4-kilometer-long starship. And he told me that it looked similar to the Battlestar Galactica ships, the large like Battlestar Galactica ships. And it was very surreal. It was very fast the way it happened, and I really didn't. A part of me like didn't really believe it. Still, I thought it was like a joke. And even after I saw this thing, it was still very hard to believe. And I even said to him, I said, you know, I could believe in going back in time, and I can believe in, you know, wiping one's memory, but I find age regression hard to believe. And he said, well, with what you just saw, you find that hard to believe. And I said, well, touche, sir, but yes. And he said, well, it's true. Like, he really wasn't trying to convince me any further. And I thought about it for a time as we were walking. And I said, you know, that scanner I went through, it detected clots. And he said, yes. And I said, my father died of a widowmaker when I was 19, which is like, you know, no warning really, just like a piece of cholesterol in the heart, and it breaks off and you die. And I said, if we had technology like that, it would have saved his life. And he went on about, you know, population control and all this other stuff. And I said, well, there has to be a side that wants to release this to the public. And he said, you mean like a traitor? And I said, no, sir. I said, there just has to be, you know, a side. And he said, well, there is. And I said, well, if you can get me on that side, I'll do it. And I shook his hand and I saluted him. And he said, one more thing, Mr. James. And he was calling me Mr. too, which only like in the Navy, only officers call each other Mr. So he was already like referring to me as an officer. And he asked me like, why did I become a SeaBee, you know, with my scores? And I said, well, I had a marijuana paraphernalia charge and all I could do was construction or be a cook. So that's how I got involved in that. And after he shook my hand and he was walking away, he turned around and he said, one more thing, Mr. James, you're going to be escorted by a reptile and he's big. And I really didn't know what he was talking about. Like I'd never, you know, I'd never heard of reptilians or anything like that before. And then after that, guys in the barracks started saying things. Like I found out later the command was trying to, you know, acclimatize me, I guess, to the situation because I really wasn't used to it. And we were playing Halo in the barracks, and one of them said, hey, did you see that reptile today? And another one said, you know, yeah, he was big. And I was thinking maybe there was, I don't know, like monitor lizards or something that lived underground, because my mind was just still thinking about Earth. And then another one said, yeah, he talked funny too. And I kind of said, what? There's reptiles that talk to you? And they're like, oh yeah, you're new here. Yeah, there's reptiles that live underground and they can speak. And I said, they just walk around on all fours and they talk to you? And they said, no, they walk upright like us. They're humanoid. And they can speak and they're tall. And yeah, and you see them every couple days or so walking around in the underground base. And I kind of thought they were just messing with me, and I kind of blew it off. And then there was like another time we were in the barracks, you know, and I had volunteered for this on a Monday. So it was coming to Friday whenever, you know, I was going to join the program. So on a Monday, and then probably like a Tuesday or Wednesday, we were playing Halo again. And this guy said, yeah, man, I was in I joined the secret space program, and I was in the mines of the moon. And he said your only motivation to work were, they had all these brothels, and your only motivation to work was sex. And he's like, yeah, I slept with all these women and it was great.
Wait,
and
humans or alien women? What's
human women from Earth. Yeah, women from Earth, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not
What's that
exciting.
going on here?
Yeah, but yeah, and he said that they're going to put you in a chair after you're done, and all you have to do is fight it, and you'll keep your memories. And he told me that. And then I asked him, I said, you know, well, did the XO come up to you? And he said, no, I just volunteered for it. Nobody came up to me. Because I was kind of thinking like he said this to everybody and I just wind up in mines or something like that. And I said, you know, the XO said I had 195 IQ and I'd become pilot of a 4-kilometer-long starship. Did he say that to you? He goes, no, man, you're going to be up there. He said, they're going to take good care of you. And all of a sudden I heard like a feedback in the room, like a feedback loop. And I heard a voice say, now hear this, now hear this. You are now in violations of Articles 7 and 8 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. If you do not stop right now, you will face up to $100,000 in fines and 10 years in prison. That'll be all. And it went away. And I looked around and I said, is there a speaker in here? And they said, one of the guys said, with the technology they have, they don't need speakers. And I kept on trying to, you know, pry them to figure out what happened. They said, you know, we shouldn't talk anymore. They're listening to us. And then the next day, another guy came up to me and he said, "Hey, James, did you hear that voice in the room?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You know, the tower by the underground base, there was like a radio tower." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You see the rectangular blocks on that tower?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "That's 5G. That's 5G technology. It's something new that they're using on this base." He said they can create a microwave beam. They can go into a room, they can see everything, they can hear everything, and they can talk if they want. And he said he saw it in the underground base. And this was like in 2004. So, you know,
Wow.
they had like 5G tech on the space back in 2004. And they told me that that's what it was for primarily, was like to spy on people without even having to like break into your house and bug it.
This
And
is
go ahead.
So 5G could potentially be problematic when it comes to that type of technology, being able to access the subconscious or deliver messages through the waves.
Yeah, and I've heard a voice in the head, but this just sounded like a speaker, and everybody could hear it. I'm not sure. It sounded more to me like it was less voice to head technology, or voice to skull is what they call it, voice to skull technology. It seemed more like just like a voice kind of in the room talking to everybody, not really one individual person. And yeah, it was Friday. It was Thursday, and I was gonna, join on Friday. And I was in the TV room in the barracks, and as I said, the command was telling people, let him know things here and there, so he's not so shocked when he sees all this stuff. And I was in the TV room, and the room right across from the TV room was open. The door was open, and the guy was kind of talking like he was talking to someone, but he wanted me to overhear him. It was kind of like one of those situations. And he said, you're going to be taken to a room, and you're going to be strapped into a chair. It's a density chamber. He said, we're third density, but most of the ETs we deal with are fifth density. It's going to push you up artificially in the fifth density because the ETs we deal with, they're much too smart and fast. We wouldn't be able to work with them. He said, you'll become stronger, faster. Your IQ will go up 200 points, and you'll become more of a collective. So It was kind of like a higher realm of consciousness almost. And so that happened. And then I went to Friday came around, and I went to the quarterdeck, and that same first class petty officer was there. And he had a stack of papers for me, like a mortgage, like a home mortgage. And, it was kind of like he was flipping pages for me. Everything was already X, signed here, initial here, doing all that stuff. And I was reading it at first, and it was saying things like, the consciousness of the first party now belongs to the second party. It's kind of like how it was worded. And it kind of creeped me out, the wording of it. And I said, I don't know if I should be doing this. And he said, you're already back there, so just sign the damn papers, is what he said. So what he was saying was I already joined the 20-year and back, and I had already come back. I was in the underground base, like being age regressed. So it was like I was in a time loop, and I kind of realized I was in a time loop. So I signed the papers, sat down. He said, have a seat. He got on the phone. He said, send them in. And I waited, I don't know, a couple minutes. I was kind of daydreaming. And he said, all right, go with him. And behind that same like glass window was like this 9.5 foot tall reptilian. He was dark brown. He had like ridges going down his head, almost like mohawks. He had like gold alligator eyes, a flat face, no real nose. His mouth just kind of went straight across and then straight up. No ears, nothing like that. And I remember I said, like, Jesus Christ, I stood up. And I said, he's not going to eat me, is he? And he said, he's much stronger and much faster than you. If he wanted to, eat you, he would have done it by now.
Oh, man.
And he actually came out of
Oh, boy.
He came out of the room, and he was standing in the quarterdeck. He like walked out of that small room and through the doors, and I saw him standing up. He was wearing like one of those skin type blue suits that you see, kind of stereotypical kind of ET uniform that you see.
Right.
And he was really big, like really big. Shoulder muscles were like basketballs. He was huge. And I stood up, and there was another guard with him, a skinny kid, a different guard. And so I stood up and I started walking with him. We went to the elevator, started walking to the underground base. The kid kept on butt stroking me, like hitting me in the back with the butt of the weapon. And Eventually I said, I'm not, looking around or doing anything wrong. I said, please stop hitting me. And he did it again. And I remember I thought, like, if he hits me with that one more time, I'm going to, throw him on the ground. And he did it, hit me in the back again. I turned around, I grabbed his weapon, I put my leg behind his legs, and I threw him on the ground and knocked the wind out of him. And I said, if you hit me with this weapon one more time, I'm going to shove it up your ass sideways. And then I heard like a voice say, leave us. And it was very deep in the beginning. It was almost like he had to push the last syllable out. It's kind of what it sounded like. So it was kind of like, leave us. It was kind of like that. And the kid got up and he looked at his weapon, looked at me, and I held the weapon out. He grabbed it and he just walked away. When I turned around, the reptile was like right in front of me. And he was like flexing all his muscles. And I remember I saw his eyes like over his chest muscles, and he was just like glaring at me. And I remember I said, I'm sorry for what I said before. You're much more civilized than him about eating me. And then his eyes were like, they don't have muscles in their face like we do. So they don't like bare their teeth or furrow their brows. You can only tell they're aggravated with you with their eyes. And his eyes were kind of squinting. And then his eyes opened up normal and he just turned around and he said, follow me. And then as we walked into the base, it started to get bigger. There were bicycles leaning against the wall, I remember, and like golf carts, like in case, I guess if somebody had to go deeper into the base, they could jump on a bike and go deeper. We were gradually walking downhill the whole time. And then eventually there was like, like a kind of a catwalk, like 3 steps going up and to a door that was like airtight door, like a watertight door with the wheel on it and everything. And we walked up into this room. And there was a chair that had straps on it, and it was very big, like it was wider than a person, so it looked like it was made for one of them. And it had holes in it, and it looked like a gas chamber chair. And I remember when I was in elementary school, we had like the DARE program, and they put which is like to keep kids doing drugs and stopping crime and stuff. And they put like a gas chamber chair with the bucket underneath it in like a trailer, and they brought it to our school, and they showed like all these little kids, and I remember it scared me. And that's what I thought it was, with the airtight door and everything else. And I went to run, and he grabbed me and he threw me in. He strapped me in. And as he was strapping me in, I was fighting. I was trying to pull his thumb up off my arm. He kind of had my arm down, pinned to the arm of the chair because I was struggling. And I remember his nails were black, but they were kind of like ours. But they went out. As soon as they came out, they kind of rolled into each other, like either side, and created like long black needles. So he had like black needles for fingernails. And I was pulling his thumb off, and then I think he headbutted me or something and knocked me out for a second. Then I came to, and my one side was strapped in, and I kind of got off the chair. It was really high up, and I kind of got off, and I was undoing the strap. He was trying to do my leg, and he grabbed me by the chest and like pushed me back in the chair, and his fingers were up here, but his palm was down here. That's how big like his hand was. And he kind of made that sound that an alligator makes when the like mating call, where you could feel the percussion in your chest, but you can't hear it. Like you could just feel the rumble in your chest. And he did that. And as he got closer to me, I could hear it. I could actually hear the noise. And he said, don't make me hit you again. And when he got close, I jammed my thumb in his eye because I was trying to get away. I thought he was trying to kill me. And he kind of leaned back and just pushed against my chest till he pushed against my heart, and I passed out. And I woke up and I was in the chair. And I remember he said, I'm sorry I have to do this to you. And he went to like a control panel area, it looked like, and started doing something, but I couldn't see it. And then he walked out and he shut the door and he tightened the wheel. And I was like hyperventilating. Maybe if I pass out, it won't be as painful as kind of like what my thought was. And then all of a sudden, it was kind of like an out-of-body experience feeling. It was like cold weightlessness and then nothing, like peace. And then that was it. The density chamber actually pushing me up from 3rd to 5th density. And when I came to, I looked to my right, and my straps are already undone. And I looked to my right, and there were 3 guys like on a mattress on the floor, and they were dressed like in club clothes, like somebody picked them up from a club, like drugged them and picked them up from a club and put them in this program, I guess. And then in front of me, I saw somebody who looked like a Gestapo. Like he had slick back hair with pomade, like an undercut, shaved on the sides. He was wearing, a black trench coat. He looked like a German Gestapo. And the reptile's back was towards me, and they were like talking to each other, like gesturing like they were talking, but they weren't speaking. And the guy who's dressed up like a German soldier from the 40s, he looked like he was the first class petty officer. He was actually a first class petty officer in the Navy. And Robert, the XO, told me this later on, where it was like the master chief of the base was, they call them offworld Germans. He was an offworld German. The S3, who was fourth in command, he was a lieutenant. He was an offworld German. The doctor of the base, who was lieutenant, he was an offworld German. We had a senior chief with a mustache and glasses. He was an offworld German. So it was kind of like that whole Project Paperclip thing went a lot deeper than people realized. And we're more like a conquered kind of nation by these offworld Germans. So they're not really spies. They're actually in the U.S. Navy, but it's just like, you know, they don't let anybody know. It's like we're a conquered nation and there's these Germans from another world. And yeah, so I came to and I kind of slid off the chair. And I remember the first thing I said is, you know, I was really woozy and out of it. And I said, can I go to bed now? That was the first thing that came in my head. And I fell down to my hands and knees. And I remember his boots came into my field of vision. And he said, I should have you executed for what you did to my man. Do you hear me? And the reptile said, it doesn't matter. He doesn't remember. And I just fell over and I passed out. And then I woke up and he was kind of carrying me like a duffel bag, like under his arm with like my head facing towards the back. And all my weight was on my bladder. And I remember I said, I have to pee. I said, put me down. I have to pee. And he wasn't saying anything. And I just said, like, I'm going to pee on you. And I just passed out. And then I saw like a bright light. And Robert later on told me that that was looking glass technology, where all underground bases have something called looking glass technology.
I've heard of
where
that.
it's like you can observe different areas of time and things like that, or you can step through the looking glass and it's a portal. And so it was a portal that was taking me into the moon. And I saw a bright light, and all of a sudden he laid me down like on a regular old medical bed. You know, I had like metal railings on the side. It was bigger though, like it was made for one of them, like a large bed. And then I heard ripping and tearing. And then all of a sudden somebody putting stickers on my chest, like heart monitor things, like it was like a physical. And it was a woman. And this was actually a woman that was on the base that I guess volunteered. She was like a computer tech. Her name was April, her first name. But I guess she volunteered for this program as well and wound up as like a nurse in the moon. And I told her she was pretty, and I asked if she could hold her hand, and she said yes. And I just passed out. And I woke up the next day, and I was in this room by myself. And she walks in, and she had something like they call it a smart glass pad, which is what the smartphone's based off of, which is like kind of like a clear pad where you put your palms on the corners. And most ET tech creates like a telepathic link. And that's why they want you to have a high IQ, because the higher IQ you have, the more likely you are to be able to do things like telepathy, looking down timelines, which means like seeing someone's future, things like that. Most ETs can look down timelines. And yeah, she came in, and then she had the smart glass pad, and she was able to kind of grab it and pull images out almost. And she kind of like, you know, put her hand towards it and pulled up, and like it was a humanoid, like a picture of a humanoid body. And she was stuck her finger in the image and was able to spin it around and look around. You can see the circulatory system. She put her hand in it and opened it up. You can see the heart, the brain. And it was just things like that. She was just giving me like a regular old physical. And she was about to leave. I spent the whole day with her, and I was talking to her, and she was about to leave. And I said, where are you going? She said, don't worry, I'll be back tomorrow. And I grabbed her by her hand, and I said, I don't know what to do or say, but I don't want you to leave me. And it was almost like ignorance is bliss, because you really had none of your memories. You could still reason and everything like that, but it was kind of like you were like a child. Like everything was new to you. This whole fifth density was new. Your color spectrum goes up. Frequency of sounds you hear can go up. Everything like goes up. You find yourself kind of going down your own timeline and coming back. Like you go 5 years into your own future for a few seconds, and you're kind of living that life. Then you kind of come back into your present. And that's kind of like what it was like. And everything was just new and amazing. And she liked, you know, I said, I don't know what to do or say. When I took her hand, I said, all I know is I don't want you to leave me. And she liked that. So she took my hand and she took me out of this room. And we were in, it looked like almost like a courtyard of a condominium. And I looked behind me, and there were like trains behind us. It was like there was like an opening. You saw a train, you know, through this opening. And it was all men, and they were wearing like gray jumpers, like they were going to work. Like it was in the middle of a shift change, it looked like. And there were these 4 lifts. They were just like these square lifts. And she took me to one of these lifts, and it had no railings or anything like that. And it just went straight up. Like I said, it looked like the courtyard of a condominium. It had like, I don't know, 5 or 6 levels. And there were women on these levels, you know, on the sidewalk of these levels. And they had babies, some of them, and they were waving. She took me to one of these lifts, and it took us up and took it directly to her room. And I remember there was a woman standing on this sidewalk, and there was no railings on these sidewalks. And we were on like the top floor. And she had a baby with her. And I said, "Aren't you afraid your baby's going to fall?" And she said, "Oh, no, you can't fall." And she just walked off. And it was like this invisible field, like on every floor, she told me. And she said it goes all the way to the other end. She said the kids play on it. They're not supposed to, but they do. And then this woman, she took me into a room, and it was real Spartan. You know, it was just like a couch, a table, a coffee table, a bar area, a bathroom, and a bedroom. She took me into the bedroom, and we started to kiss. And she said, "Wait, what's your name?" And I said, "I don't know." And she said, "Come on, think. Everybody remembers their name." And I thought about it, and I said, "Daryl." And we started to kiss, and we had sex. And I fell asleep like on the headboard of the bed, and she fell asleep on my chest. And I just kind of dozed off, and I woke up, and I was back in England. But like that memory was concrete. And I remember the first class petty officer told me that some people remember the first or second day, but that's it. And yeah, like that's kind of like how it started out. That's kind of the beginning of it.
That is
That's
a
really
lot. That's very
fascinating,
detailed.
yeah. Can you go through the looking glass technology?
Well,
Do you know
before
much
we have
about
4
that?
minutes before we have 4
Oh,
minutes before the first
wow.
break. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
it's
was
just fascinating.
you do have a second hour with us? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Can't leave us
Yeah.
hanging, Daryl.
Yeah, I feel
I'm
like
right,
there's
you
a
can't
story
leave
is
us
totally
hanging.
untold. Come on, man. There's so much
Oh,
more to tell.
man. Yeah.
There is so much there. I have so many
There.
questions,
Yeah.
but I think that you're actually answering most of the questions that I had. As a matter of fact, you've already answered some of the questions the audience had, which is fantastic because you're very detailed. I mean, your recollection of this is
Like,
now I know there's a lot that
unbelievable.
you don't remember, but at least what you do remember, it's very detailed. There's a lot of in and out, obviously, of consciousness, so there's a lot that you don't remember, like I said, and I can clearly tell there's so much more you got. So you have a lot more to tell about experiences after this, or that you kind of remembered as time went on.
I remembered as time went on, the command was doing things like, you know, like I said, there was a group of people who were asked to join the program but didn't, and they kind of kept tabs on people that did to see if they had any memories. So people were like asking me things like, "You ever heard of reptiles before?" And like, I said no, and it was almost like they went back and they kind of erased those memories as well. And yeah, and there was also a group of Satanists on the base that drank at the bar on base, and I used to drink with them because they kind of told me things like a life I didn't know I had, and they like knew things about me. And that's one of the main reasons why this is extremely true to me, is because these other people were just telling me parts of my life that I didn't know I had. And eventually it goes up to the executive officer telling me everything basically that happened to me. Like I became good friends with him in the program. He became like a father figure to me, kind of thing.
All right. So in the second hour, what are you going to finish telling us? Because we can't start it now. We have 2 minutes. So what are you going to tell us in the second hour?
I mean, well, I mean, something that, you know, when I woke up, and I was back in England. I'd like to go into more detail about that. And I kept on saying, like, I was with a woman. Like, what happened? I was with it was so weird. I looked out the window and everything was different. And I got up, you know, and I had like my T-shirt on still and my black socks on, which I really don't sleep with a shirt on, or especially like black dress socks on. And you know, there was a chair in front of me, and my uniform was kind of laid out all neatly with my shoes tucked up underneath it. And you know, I got up and I took my shirt off, and I was very toned, like very muscular. And I didn't know why I was so toned. And I kind of, you know, rubbed my fingers through my hair, and I had burnt stubble, like burnt hair. And I rubbed it down my chest hair, and I had burnt stubble. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I remember there was a guy, I left the room, I got dressed, and I went out. And there was a guy waiting for me almost in the hall. And he said, "Congratulations, you made it." And I said, "What?" And he said, 20 years is a long time. A lot of people don't make it. And I didn't know what he meant. And yes, it was just all these people were just saying all these different things, almost like a life I didn't know I had. And eventually I went to this bar, and this guy I called.
Wait. Before you finish, we got to go on our first break. When
All
we
right,
come back,
go ahead.
tell us what happened at the bar. I'm actually really excited about this. Is really all right, everybody. Hang tight, chat. We'll be right back after the what would be, I guess you can call it our very first break. So hang tight, everyone.
They're watching from the shadows, an intelligence beyond our own. Whistleblowers shouting warnings, researchers feeling all alone. We're blinded by our arrogance, thinking we're the only ones in control. But they've been among us, preparing for their role. This revelation is shock to our core. Are we ready for what's in store? Something is coming, we can feel it in the air. Our force so powerful, beyond compare. They've been trying to warn us, but we just don't care. We're not prepared, it's too much to bear. They're not like us, there's something more. A non-human intelligence knocking on our door. Whistleblowers risk it all. Researchers sounding the alarm once more, but we're too focused on ourselves. Blind to the signs of what's to come. Will we wake up in time, or will we be left numb? We've been warned, but will we listen? Something is coming, we can feel it in the air. Our force so powerful, beyond compare. They've been trying to warn us, but we just don't care. We're not prepared, it's too much to bear. They're not like us, there's something more. A non-human intelligence knocking on our door. Whistleblowers risk it all. Researchers sounding the alarm once more, but we're too focused on ourselves. Blind to the signs of what's to come. Will we wake up in time, or will we be left numb? We've been warned, but will we listen? Something is coming, we can feel it in the air. Our force so powerful, beyond compare. They've been trying to warn us, but we just don't care. We're not prepared, it's too much to bear. Something is coming, we can feel it in the air. Our force so powerful, beyond compare. They've been trying to warn us, but we just don't care. We're not prepared, it's too much to bear.
We are back. Whoa. Great music, though. Love it. Welcome back, everybody, to the Coley and Marquise show. This has been quite a wild ride, because honestly, the detail that we've gotten from Daryl about his experience, I think it's some of the most detailed recollection I've ever heard from anyone tell a story for the most part about their experiences. So I don't know how you remembered all that, but I am quite curious as to how you, because if I could have a little bit of that, maybe it's the IQ, maybe it's just who you are as a person. I don't know, but I am curious as to how you remembered all that detail.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I was just I've always been good at remembering things, even like from my childhood. I've always had like very detailed memories about events that happened to me in life. It's just a part of it, part of my life.
It's
But
impressive.
yeah, thank you. Um, Going back to, like I said, the bar kind of area,
Mhm.
that part of the story. Yeah,
Yes.
so I walked in to the bar, and the guy I called the goon, he had like a shaved head. He was very big. He was English, and there was three other English guys, three or four other ones sitting at the bar all the time. He was sitting at one of the tables. They were always sitting at the bar, and he stood up. He goes, "Hey, it's the king of the Tijetans." He said, "What's up, man?" He said, "Aquino fucked you up." He said he had me doing things to you. He had me, smashing your toes with a hammer, and he was cutting you, and he had me burn you and all this other stuff. And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You don't remember that?" And I said, "No." And I remember the other guys in the back kind of said, "You're not supposed to tell them things like that." They said, "Stop it. You're not supposed to tell them things like that." And I'd kind of wait for these people to get like drunk, this guy drunk, and I would drink a little bit, but I would kind of just wait for him to get drunk, and he would just start telling me things like a life I didn't know I had. And I remember one time we were, and this was confusing to me. I mean, I'm trying to get you into like my mindset, like, because I didn't know it. And I said, "What's a Tijetan?" And he said, "You ever heard of Billy Meyer?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "The Pleiadians." And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, you need to look them up on the internet." And he's like, "It's based, it's them." He's like, he was talking about them. And I remember we were watching Mission Impossible, I think, and it was Tom Cruise. And he said, "I got to meet Tom Cruise the other day." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "He bought adrenochrome from me." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "It's a drug you get from kids." And I remember the other people that worked on the base, they said, like, Tom Cruise was here the other day. And I said, "Why?" And they didn't really know. They said, "Well, we don't know." And I thought maybe he was just doing like a movie part, because, they sometimes allow celebrities and the like nuclear subs and things like that to do movies. I thought maybe he was doing a movie about an underground base or something. And so this went on for a while, and then I was at the 4th of July party on base, and we were cooking like hamburgers and hot dogs, and the XO with his daughter was there. And I think I was 27 at this time. I joined the program at 26. I was 27 at the time, and he said, "Petty Officer James, I'd like to introduce you to my daughter." And I talked to her, and I was asking her where she was from and things like that, and I eventually, asked her for her phone number. She turned me down, and then he said, "Petty Officer James, do you play guitar?" And I said, "I used to, sir." And he said, "Well, you should think about taking that back up." And it was really weird that he knew that about me. It's like this strange, and like I said, these strange events kind of happened in the base, because I had an additional 2 years in this command after I was done with the program, and I really didn't have all my memories back. And things like that happened. There was one time I was hanging out with this English guy, and we were watching like action movies or something like that, and we were up late till like, I don't know, 1 or 2 in the morning, probably about 2 in the morning. And he had a couch by the window, and he said, he looked out the window and he said, "Look, we were on like the 4th floor." And I looked out, and it looked like there was a guy with a black hooded sweatshirt with black sweatpants, black sneakers, and he was carrying what looked like a body over his shoulder that was wrapped up in like one of those dark gray wool military blankets. And I remember I said, like, "Should we help him?" And he looked at me and he said, "No, it's too late for him. He already made his choice. We can't help him."
Oh,
And I didn't know like what he was talking about. And I was, what? Like, it was very strange to me. Now, when I think about it, I remember being carried over someone's shoulder and like breathing like the cold air after the program was over. And I think that was a guy that probably volunteered for the program. And that's how they take you back to your room. Like, they wait till like late at night, and then they just wrap you up in a blanket and they take you back to your room. And I remember another time in the barracks, a guy, he was in the hallway and I was in the hallway, and he was speaking to someone else. And he said, like, you know, I had this dream, but it wasn't a dream. Like I was in the moon, and like there were all these mines, and you know, and all these women were there, and things like that. And he couldn't comprehend it. He didn't know what was happening. And you know, I remember another time with the Satanists in the bar. They were all kind of very, I don't know, very hyperactive, speaking very quickly, like a mile a minute. And it seemed like they were on speed or cocaine or something like that. And I said, "What are you guys on, coke?" And they said, "No, man, we're on chrome. We're on chrome." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "It's a drug you get from kids." And it kind of went in one ear and out the other because I had no idea what they were talking about at the time. And eventually I got to the point where I was getting out of the Navy. You know, I was getting into trouble and things like that. I was drinking a lot. I had horrible depression. Like for some reason I had like this really bad depression. I started taking like antidepressants, which I never took in my life. I was never really a depressed person. I kept on having nightmares and dreams and things like that I didn't understand. And you know, I saw the Master Chief of the base, who was an overweight guy with glasses. And then I walked into the XO's office, a guy named Robert, and the executive officer. And he stood up really slowly, and he looked sad, like he knew me. And then he just appeared at the end of his desk, like a flash of an eye. And then I kind of, it startled me. And I remember I thought, like, did I have a stroke? And then he just appeared right in front of me. And I took a step back, and he took a step forward. And in my head, I heard, "Can you hear what I'm saying to you?" And then I said yes back in my head, but it's something that, like, I don't know, higher density beings do, or like ETs, or they want you to make like a physical gesture. So you realize this isn't just a voice in your head. This is something real. And he said it again. He said, "Can you hear what I'm saying to you?" And I nodded my head, and under my breath, I said, "Yes." And he said, "What do you remember?" And I said, my first memory, I had like these small little bits and pieces. I can remember the beginning and I can remember the end, but I couldn't remember really what was in between. And I said, I remember a woman, she was tall, sitting down. She had long silver hair, big blue eyes, and big cheekbones. She had a boy on her lap. I kissed the boy on the head, and then I kissed her. And he said, "That was Mother." And he said, "You had a son with her." And I said, "I have a son." And he said, "You have dozens of sons and hundreds of daughters." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Yeah." And then he just started going into detail about all these different things. He said, "Daryl, you didn't go get pushed down in the fifth density properly, or third density properly." He said, "You're still partially in fifth density. You have to go back into the chair. You still have your memories. Something went wrong. You still have your memories." And he said that people that have memories of the 20-year and back, they usually commit suicide within the first 6 months.
Oh no.
And yeah, so he started telling me all these things, and he kind of realized that I wasn't going to go back into the chair. Like I said, "I don't trust you." You know, I didn't really trust the guy. I didn't know him from this life. I knew him from that past life. And when I said, "Do I know you?" he said, "You were like a son to me." He was saying things like that. And he started going down my timeline, is what they say. Which, you know, he was fifth density, so he could see into my future. And eventually he said, "Well, you make it." He said, "It's difficult, but you make it." And then I remember I started remembering things just by talking to him. The more he's talked to me, the more I started to remember. It was almost like a memory that was in the back of my head that I really had no idea why I forgot it to begin with. It's kind of like how it felt until somebody actually brought it up and started giving me greater detail about it. And he started. I said, "They're the ones they call the Pleiadians, right?" And he said, "We call them Tijetans." I know he said, "We call them Nordics." I said, "What do they call themselves?" He said, "Tijetans." And then he started telling me different names like Swaru, Sharai, Leah, and things like that. All these different names of all these different people I knew. He said I had all these wives. He said that they were, what do they call that? Polygamist, because the women go through like a bonding process, like a 10-month bonding process with their babies. And you can't get near them. They only like focus on the baby, and that's it. They don't go to work. They don't do anything else. And he said the men, they basically rut, like the male equivalent of going into heat every 6 months for about 2 weeks. So it's like they have to have more than one wife. So that's just like the way they're kind of built that way. And yeah, One of the memories I had was I was being drugged through a tunnel when I got back, like a cave. And I remember when I came back, not only did I have like the burnt hair, I had clay on the tops of my feet that I couldn't figure out why I had clay on the tops of my feet. And it was because I was being drugged naked through like this like cave. And there was a woman to my right, and I call her the goth. She was like this kind of goth chick that was in the Navy. And then the Satanist guy, the guy I call the goon, was on my left. And she said, "I'm tired. Let's take a break." And then she dropped me, and he was still kind of holding me by the one arm. And I looked over, and there were these kids like in dog kennels, and they were pure white, and they had like, dilated eyes. Their hair was like matted. They were white as sheets, though, like they had never seen the sun. And this girl kind of scurried up and slammed her hands on the front of this cage. And the woman, she hit the cage and said, "Get the fuck back." And when I looked over, there was like bars kind of like embedded into the earth, like into this cave with like a cell behind it, like a cage. And there was like a half human, half spider kind of being, where it had the lower half of a spider, it had the torso of a man, it had arms, and then like right at the elbows, it became like black wiry hair. And instead of hands, it had like two black prongs, like the way a spider does at the end of its legs. It had fangs. It had two black eyes where its eyes should have been, but then it had black eyes going up its head, getting gradually smaller, going up its head. And it had a black tuft of like wiry hair on top of its head. And it was just staring at like the other wall, but I knew it could see me because it had eyes on the side of its head. And I remember one of the Satanists said, "Let's just feed him the max." And another one said, "No, we're going to see what Aquino wants to do to him." And so I remember this as Robert was telling me all these things, and I said, "What were the kids for? What were the kids for, Robert? Like, I wanted to know, like, what were they for?" And he was trying to like avoid the topic, and I kept on saying it. And then he said, "You remember that movie Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "You remember the adrenochrome scene?" And I said, "Yes."
Oh,
and he said, "Well, that's where they get it from." And he started telling me about that. And he said they electrify the cages. So it shocks the kids, and it causes the adrenaline to kick in. They shock them till they're unconscious. They pull them out. They strap them to a table, and they put like a needle on the back of their neck near the base of their skull, and they kind of give them like a spinal tap, and that's what draws the adrenochrome out. And I said, "How much did they get?" And he said 2 or 3 pints. And I said, "Some of those kids were only like 3 or 4 years old. That would kill them." And he says, "It does." And he said that they put him in something that looks like a wood chipper, and they feed him to the other children. So it's like a kind of like a forced cannibalism kind of thing. He said once they start showing signs of puberty, they don't have as many stem cells, and that's what they want the adrenochrome for more than anything else. And he said they slit their throat and they throw them in that wood chipper and they feed them to the other kids. And he said if she, I said the girl like hit her hands on the cage. He said she would have attacked you if she got out. He said they're feral. He said they've never been held or talked to or anything like that, so they're kind of like wild animals. And he said that then he started going into greater detail about it, and he told me that Tom Hanks was like the kingpin of adrenochrome. And he said that there's going to be like this big like scare event where everybody's going to be afraid of the flu, and everybody's going to have to wear a mask, and you're going to have to go to the grocery store or the doctor's office. You have to wear a mask. And he started telling me all these things. And he said that they're going to catch Tom Hanks in Australia, and they're going to act like, everything's all right, but they caught him in Australia and they executed him there. And he said that the last movie that Tom Hanks actually did was a Navy movie. He said a Navy movie is going to be the last one he did, and that was the Apple TV one he did about, I don't know, a captain in the Navy or something. And then he told me about the Elvis Presley movie he was going to do where he's going to play the colonel. He said that's actually his brother in a fat suit. He said his brother sounds just like him. He said his brother did the voice of Woody, the toy Woody in Toy Story, when you pulled the string and you heard the toy talk to get like royalties and things like that, because his brother sounds just like him. And he told me that. And then he said that Tom Cruise, the reason he was on the base is because he was the main distributor for the Scientologist for adrenochrome. And he asked me, he said, "Why do you think Tom Cruise stays perpetually 30 years old, plastic surgery?" And I said, "I never really thought about it." And he said, "Nobody does." And he said, "You're going to see him age." And it looked like this last Top Gun movie, he's really aged, and he's aged more. He said, if you do the drug, however long you've done it, if you've done it for 10 years, if you don't get the drug anymore, you age pretty much 20 years in about 2 weeks. He said you only have to do it once a week because your body stops producing its own stem cells. Kind of like when somebody does steroids, it stops producing testosterone. It's like your body stops producing stem cells. And you only have to do it once a week. And then by the second week, you age dramatically. And then by the third week, you usually die. And he said they're going to catch a lot of these people and they're going to put them in cells. And he actually called them vampires. He said, but if they don't get their drug, they turn into ghouls, is how he put it. Like they just age dramatically. They can't eat. They'll vomit. You know, they get very skinny. Their hair falls out. Their teeth starts falling out. That's kind of like what Celine Dion's looking like right now. I don't know. It's like, but yeah, and he told me you'd see this. You'd see different actors and different singers and things like that. They start aging very dramatically all of a sudden. He said that they would start selling a synthetic kind on the dark web during the lockdowns of this, you know, epidemic or whatever they want to call it. And it was a synthetic form, and it was just enough to keep them alive, but it would have a type of tech in it that would be almost like a fingerprint, like in a court of law, where it's kind of like you know where this drug comes from, so it's the same as murder. So if you inject the synthetic stuff into you, you know, you could be put on trial for basically murder. And wow. He told me that Jack White of the White Stripes was the main distributor for the music industry. He said he's going to, you know, only make a couple more albums after this and then retire from music because he makes so much money off of Adrenochrome sales. And he said that the song Little Ghost was about the children in the underground bases because they're white like ghosts. And it was like, you know, little ghost, the one I fear the most. Can you scare me up some love? Scare, the adrenaline kicks in. Love is the drug, you know, love, drug. Because of my condition, his condition is if he stops doing adrenochrome, he'll die. He fears them because he fears what the public will think, you know, if they know what he does. And then the part where it says, I thought I was holding her hand, but I was holding a glove. Robert told me that they stay in cages their whole life, so they're like veal. So the sinuate doesn't connect properly to the skin because they never get exercise or anything like that. So if you grab them, it feels like you could pull their skin off like a glove. Yeah, and he told me he was the main distributor for the music industry. And then he asked me if I ever heard of the guys from South Park. And I said, yeah. I said, Trey Parker and Matt Stone, because I watched the show. And he smiled and he said, yeah. And he said, you remember when they went to the Oscars? And I said, yeah, they went in drag and they were on acid. And he laughed and he said, you know why they did that? And I said, no. And he said, because they're all scum. And I said, who? And he said, Hollywood. He said, they're all scum. And he said that an episode would come up. He told me about the Q thing. He said it would be real at first. Then it would go away for 4 or 5 months. And then he said, that's not real. He said, but it doesn't matter because it's already started by then. So whenever that Q thing, when it just went away for 4 or 5 months and came back, he said that was someone else. That wasn't, he said it was like an affiliation of like military officers and
I heard that.
Yeah, military enlisted. And he said that there's going to be, well, going back to the South Park thing before I forget, but I'll go back to the whole, the coup is how he put it in case I forget. But he said that they gave him the script. The military basically gave him the script for the South Park episode spelt with a Q instead of a K. And it was about like adrenochrome and stuff like that. And he said it was supposed to be really over the top and kind of made fun out of the people who follow the Q movement because they kind of took things out of hand and they got way too much into it. And he said that he called it soft disclosure, basically. It's like a way to kind of plant a seed into the public subconscious. So whenever these events actually happen, when they realize that, you know, different actors you like and athletes you like and musicians you like, you find out that a vast majority of them are doing this drug called adrenochrome and are into these things. And yeah, he said he called it soft disclosure, kind of like a way to plant a seed into the subconscious of the public. And then he said there's going to be a coup. And I kind of thought, you know, coups are bad. I was like, well, what kind of coup? And he's like, no, you're going to like this coup. Like, you don't understand. And this was like 2005, I want to say, the end of the winter of 2005. And he said, maybe 2006. He said, you're going to like this coup. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, Daryl, they start castrating children. And I said, what? And he's like, yeah. And he said, that's when the military steps in. Like, that was like the final straw for the military. And he told me about the transgender movement and things like that. And, you know, how they start chemically castrating children and things like that, and telling them they were girls when they're boys and so on and so forth. Kind of just causing great confusion, because that's the Satanist way, he told me. He said, like, order out of chaos. They create as much chaos as they can. They lower the population of the earth extremely, like by like 500 million, and then they ruled over the rest of us like slaves.
Yeah.
And that's like what the Satanist plan is. And
problem, reaction, solution. Yep.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they cause all the problems. Yeah. And he told me about the transgender movement. And I said, how do they do this? He said they do it slowly. They implement things slowly, and the public accepts it. And he asked me if I ever heard of Harry Hay. And I said, no. And he said, Harry Hay was the leader of the gay rights movement in the 1950s. He said in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and all the way till he died, Harry Hay marched out the front of NAMBLA. And I said, what's that? And he said, the North American Man-Boy Love Association, an organization to make pedophilia legal.
Oh,
and he said that the gay rights movement from day one was funded by the CIA, because it was a way to slowly implement pedophilia into the public. And they started putting that on their flag now. And he said, because once the civilization accepts pedophilia, it falls within 100 years, and they're trying to basically crush our civilization. There's some truth in it about America has to fall first. It's something the Satanists believe, that before this great, new reset or whatever they want. They feel like America has to fall first. And then he told me things.
I don't know much but that's crazy, and I was looking back and watching some older movies, and then I heard like the transgender movies. I'm trying to think, Along Came a Spider or something, and they talked about it there, and then I didn't even pick up at it at the time. So there's been going back some of the old movies where I didn't even realize it was even talked about, and it is. They've been doing this for quite some time. So yeah.
And then he said that I got comic books on the base at the time. I read comic books, and it was a small base, so people knew each other's business. And he said they killed Spider-Man. I said, what? And he said, yeah. He said in the Ultimate universe, they kill him and they replace him with a half black, half Hispanic kid called Miles Morales. And then he said the Satanists will stand back and they'll wait and they'll judge to see how the public reacts. He said they try to start at the lowest level possible to judge how the public reacts. And then he said they're going to work their way up the movies. He said they're going to bring out all these remakes, and they're going to be horrible. He said they're going to have a Ghostbuster remake, and they're going to have a RoboCop remake. And he said they're going to bring Harrison Ford back or Indiana Jones when he's 60, and it's going to be pathetic. And he said they're doing this on purpose. They're bringing out all these horrible movies on purpose. And then he said they stand back and they judge the reaction of the people. And then he said, then they work their way up to your statues and they start tearing your statues down. And I said, why do they do this? He said, they wish to destroy your heroes. He said, you're less likely to fight back if they destroy your heroes. And the Satanists always start at the lowest level possible and kind of judge the reaction of the public to see if they say anything or protest or do anything. And that's kind of how it works, the way he described it to me. And he told me about that. He told me about how I just feel like this is an important part, because he's telling me all these different things about how everything works, how they think. If you want me to move on to the topic, I don't know, but
well, I'm curious about the ultimate agenda. What's the ultimate goal of this whole thing?
He told me that. He said, you think I look like Mike Pence? And I said, who's Mike Pence? Because this was 2005. And he's he becomes the vice president and Trump becomes the president. And I was like, Trump becomes the president, the billionaire? And he said, yeah. And he said that I'm right. He said, I'm from Mike Pence. I'm from the original timeline of Earth, is kind of what he said. And Mike Pence is what the people of the future kind of look like. And he looked just like him. He said that their hair's black, their eyes are usually brown, sometimes blue. He kind of had that same needle nose. He had that constant scowl on his face, like the way Mike Pence always scowls. He said their hair begins to salt and pepper at 50 years old, turns pure white by 60. Their eyebrows turn pure white by 70. And their average life expectancy is 110. And I remember I said, like, that's horrible. I said in Star Trek they live to 120, and he said we didn't reach our true potential. And he said the off-world Germans live over 800 years. He said that's how long we should live. And he said that the Tijetans, like the Pleiadians, live over 3,000 years. Oof. And he said that when Hillary Clinton won the election, that was the original timeline. He said that immigration became much worse. We kind of got flooded. People were fighting back. It was no good. He said in Hillary Clinton's second term, we got into a war with China that was intended to be lost. He said that because of, I guess, the Second Amendment, it would have taken too long. Everybody's armed in America pretty much. And he said because so many people are armed, it would have taken like 20 years for the Chinese government to conquer us. So we were like carpet bombed with nuclear weapons and America fell. And then he said there were forced breeding programs where they kind of interbred everybody. And then they sent the lighter skinned people over to Asia and they interbred them with the Asians. And I said, what did they do with the darker skinned people? He said they killed them all off. And then after they created like one people, they were kind of at peace for 100 years. And then they realized they made a mistake, he said, and Earth was going to reach its true potential. And they started breeding programs. He said that we weren't going to go beyond 5th density. And I guess if a world doesn't keep evolving and going all the way up to 9th density, it eventually dies. And then he said that they tried extracting like a certain gene. And then it created kind of like the Mike Pence people, which everybody kind of looked the same. They all kind of looked like Mike Pence. And he said we had to go back and fix the timeline. And that was like his mission. And I said, was your mission successful? And he said, yes. And I said, well, what about your mom and dad? And he said, my mother's gone. My father's gone. All my brothers and sisters, my friends are gone. And I said, well, what are you still doing here? And he said, I don't know. Like he had no idea why he was still alive. And I said, like, well, was your wife from that timeline? He said, no. And I said, well, what happened to your daughter? And he looked almost like he was going to cry. And he said, I don't know. Like it was very terrifying for him to think about. And yeah, so he told me all these different things. He told me about all these different events that were going to take place in the future. And a lot of them have. And he kind of explained to me the ins and outs of why they do things the way they do, like why they start at the lowest level possible. And then I just said, you know, I'm not going back in the chair. I don't trust you. I had it in my head that they were going to come back for me and help.
Chair, or when you say I'm not going back in that chair, so that's like the chair that they talk about in the Montauk Project, or what do you
Well, it was that density chamber chair.
Okay.
They called the density chamber the chair, and because he said I was still partially in 5th, and something went wrong, and I wasn't in 3rd density properly. And that's what was wrong with me. That's why I still kept my memories, because I was still partially in 5th density. And, you know, I didn't trust him. And I said, no, I'm not doing it. You know, I was convinced. I had in my head that these people were coming back for me. He said, Daryl, they were just using you. And I asked him, I said, why do they like me so much? You know, like, why me? Talking about the Pleiadians, you know.
So
and he said,
Pleiadians. You had contact with them? What were they like?
Oh, I mean, there was, you know, like I said, 3,000 years they lived. They were primarily blonde hair, blue eyed. Their eyes were about a 5th larger than ours. The women were probably about 5'10" on average. The men were about 6'4". There was like a warrior caste. They were around 6'10", 7 foot, like a military class of them. Yeah, they lived 3,000 years. As I said before, the women go through a bonding process with the babies. You know, the men rut, so they have more than one wife. The female to male ratio is probably about 30-1, and that's another part of it. It's mostly women on their world, fewer men. And I mean, I just kind of got used to their culture and their people, and it just became second nature to me about how they were. They were telepaths. They were extremely smart. The kids learned extremely quickly. I mean, and they, you know, they had their own civilization, they had their own world, which is similar to Earth. It was almost like a, you know, like a temperate kind of climate, but they had complete control over their weather. So there was no snow. It rained when they wanted it to rain. There were no earthquakes. There were no hurricanes. It was mountainous. A lot of pine trees, like you'd see on Earth. It looked like Colorado or Norway. You know, a lot of lakes, a lot of rivers, things like that.
Do they wear clothes? Do they have anything personality wise that stuck out to you?
I mean, the warrior caste were more like us, like regular men, I guess. They would kind of joke with each other. They would kind of have like, you know, you know, bust each other chops kind of thing. Like jog for position over who was like, you know, they all knew who was in charge and who was the leader, but they would kind of like give each other a hard time sometimes and joke around. They'd laugh more. The regular men typically didn't laugh. The women would smile more often. They would laugh. They would smile more, but not laugh as much as the men. They wore like a blue uniform, you know, on the ships and things like that. And I remember they had a ranking system, which was like, mother was like, the midwife, she was like an elder female. She was like the headmaster of the schools, and the school on the ship, they'd learn about their past lives, the children, and that's how kind of like they would just remember, you know, if they were a pilot in a past life, they would just know how to do that again because they would remember that past life, because you're kind of just one consciousness with many lives, and most ETs remember their past lives, but we don't, and that's part of what they learn in school. And then there was Elder, and he was her husband, kind of. He was very tall. They live 3,000 years, and they pretty much stay at their peak for about 1,000 years, which is about the same for us, which is like 20 years old for a woman, 27 for a man. They kind of stay that same look for about 1,000 years. And then they begin to age at around 1,000 years. And then around 2,000 years, their bones begin to grow again, but their skin doesn't grow. So they start getting taller gradually, like they start growing again gradually, but nothing else grows. So they get very lean, and their skin becomes almost kind of transparent, like kind of, sort of, I guess. It just as like we age, like the back of your hands and things like that, become kind of transparent. Yeah. And
do you know what their planet looked like?
I mean, from a distance?
Yeah, like, do you know or any specifics like about their planet or what it
This
looks
is the
like?
one with the mountainous one, the one that has like
Yeah. It was temperate. Yeah, like I said, it was mountainous. It looked like Colorado or Norway. Yeah, it was rivers, you know, pine trees, things like that. It was very on the ship. They were primarily like vegetarians. There was actually a hydroponics. A third of the ship was hydroponics, because they believed like freshness of food was a big part of health and longevity of life. And but they would drink like a blue liquid that was like your fats, your proteins, your amino acids, your B vitamins. And on their home world, they ate a lot of fish. But I guess because, you know, it wasn't really feasible to have a fish hatchery on the ship. And but yeah, they would kind of substitute like meat. They didn't eat like beef or anything like that. I remember they just ate primarily fish on their world.
Fascinating.
And yeah, she had a husband named Elder, and he was like he was tall. He was very tall. Like probably 9.5 feet, maybe 10 feet tall. He was very old. He had a white beard, white hair. They really don't walk that much. They walk very slowly as they get older. Like their muscles don't grow, you know, but their bones grow. So they become very lean and long. And then there was Leader, and Leader was a warrior caste, and he had a wife, and her name was Leader as well, her rank. So they were both kind of like Leader, and they were like the leader, I guess you would say. And he had like 30 wives. And yeah, that was just kind of like how they were. They had like a family day, I guess you would say, like probably once a week, where they wouldn't work and they would all kind of come together and they talk about their week, and they'd watch the children play and things like that. The kids would run around. The kids were taken care of mostly by like mother and the women that were working with her during like the work week, and then they would spend time with the kids at like the end of the week with their children. Yeah, what else was I going to say? Oh, well, Robert said the reason they like me so much is because you could speak to the children, is what he said. And I said, what do you mean? He said the kids, until they're about 5 or 6 years old, they speak a type of pig Latin where the adults can't understand it. And I said, well, like, what did it sound like? And he said, it's like baby talk with a couple words here and there. And I said, well, say it. And, you know, he kind of said, first we went to the apakakaka and then over to the arapakata. It's like a babble that they kind of substitute as words, because telepathy is kind of like 50% words, 50% emotions. But with the children, it was more like 80% emotion and 20% word. And because he called me something called an empathic telepath, where I don't need to know the language or the culture or the people. I just kind of sense what they're communicating. So it's almost like a universal translator, having like a person like that. And I remember like I started speaking to the children when they were running around. I was sitting down and I started speaking to them that same way. And they all came up to me and they were amazed. And I remember the adults said, how do you do that? And I just said, how do you not? And like they didn't know what to think about it. And when something is like amazing to them, or gets their attention, they kind of get very wide-eyed and they'll cock their head, or they'll look back and forth at each other and they won't say anything, but they're just very, you can tell they're very amazed. Their eyes get very large. They don't have music like us. Their music is more like environmental sounds, birds, animals of their home world, things like that, with like a rhythm to it. They really don't have harmony and melody, things like that, like we have. And I remember the first time I was playing classical guitar, like when I was in the Dark Fleet. I went to there first.
Oh, that's what they said, the music, that they would like that.
Yeah, they were amazed by our music. They were amazed by like our classical art, classical music. It was something they really didn't do. It was just not part of their culture. They didn't do things like that. So when they heard me play like classical music, they all got very wide-eyed and like their mouths would kind of drop open a little bit, and they were like just shocked and amazed. And they said, how do you do that? Like they had no idea how I did that. And eventually I started like teaching the kids and things like that how to play music, and they got good at it. And it just became, I was just sharing like my culture with them, and they were doing the same thing with me.
That's awesome. So how did they teach their children? Was it like holographically? Was it, similar to, I mean, I can imagine it's got to be far more progressive than what ours is.
I don't remember it being holographically. As they get older, they get much more telepathic, and they get much more, they could see down timelines. They can actually go back in time and timelines, like older ETs, which the younger ones can't do that. So they'll just basically kind of create like a telepathic link with a child, and they'll go back in their timeline, not of only this life, but of past lives as well. And they'll pretty much help the children rediscover like past lives, and anything they did in their past life, they'll remember once again. It's almost, that's kind of like how they learn. So if they worked in the hydroponic farm in a past life, they'll remember how to do that all over again. Like they'll just remember everything about it. It's like your soul memory is different than your brain memory. The soul memory is like, it has no limit. Like it'll just remember everything from all past lives, but it's like different from this memory. So it's just kind of like the elder ETs, like Mother and things like that, will just kind of go back in time on their timeline and help them rediscover all these old like occupations they did in past lives, and they'll be able to remember how to do it all over again.
Wow.
Yeah, there's
So
a
did
lot
you
of questions.
meet any other? Oh yeah, sorry. How many different types have you encountered and worked with?
I mean, I went into I asked Robert, like, what was my timeline? I wanted to have some sort of, as far as what I did in the secret space program. He said for poking that reptile in the eye, you were going to be sentenced to 20 years hard labor in the mines of the moon, if not longer, maybe even 40. He said it's like a special punishment that they give people, where they don't wipe their memory, they send them back in time, and they almost always commit suicide when they get back. Oh, and so when I was there, a German came up to me, like an off-world German. They call themselves Deutsch. And he came up to, Robert was there. Robert kind of kept tabs on the people that he had in the program and everything like that. And he talked to another German. I was working in the mines of the moon. I don't remember exactly what we were mining, but it was hard labor. And he talked to the German. The German came up to me with like a device. He scanned me. he said, "Come with me," and I wound up getting processed in to the Dark Fleet, Knockwaffen. When I was in the Dark Fleet, I actually went to like a kind of a space station kind of thing, almost like a United Nations, where different warring factions would talk peace. A lot of trade happened there. ETs like trade. They like trade from different worlds, whether it's different foods. We have a big export of our biggest exports are chocolate, like cocoa. They like our cocoa chocolate. Beer. You see Heineken a lot. Carlsberg. They like our beer, and also children's clothes, because a lot of the beings, most of the beings you see are very like short and small. So children's clothing, and they kind of like our style and our fashion. And when I was on like this space station kind of area, I saw most of the beings were small, like maybe a foot or two tall, and they were kind of like running around. And the taller beings like us had this unspoken rule almost, where they walk very slowly, and all these other smaller beings would kind of scurry around them. But I saw beings like, people call them the Lyrans, like the cat people. Basically, everything you see like carved on the walls of an Egyptian pyramid, that wasn't like their imagination. Those were like real beings. There's like a higher density. So I saw like feline beings. I saw canine beings. I saw like the Andromedan kind of beings, like deep blue skin with the big heads and the big eyes. So I saw many beings like that on this kind of space station area. And that's when I first met the Pleiadians. That's like, there was a contract that the Reptilians broke. They showed them the contract they had, and they said that, he rightfully belongs to us. You need to give him back. They gave me back. And yeah, that's how I wound up meeting them.
What were they like?
As far as what? The Pleiadians?
Yeah.
Well, that was what I was talking about. Yeah.
Okay.
The Tigetans, the Nordics.
The ones that lived for 3,000 years, the Pleiadians.
Nordics, okay.
The Nordics, yeah.
Well, when you called it a different name, I'm sorry.
The military calls them Nordics. The public calls them Pleiadians. I've heard them called Pleiadians as well, but I remember Robert said that they're called Tigetans, because the star that they're from is called Tigeta in the Pleiades star cluster. And once you reach once you attain space travel, it's an easier way to keep track of your people, because you can just point at a star chart and say, that's where I'm from. You name your people after your star once you achieve space travel. It's kind of how it works.
Yeah, the off-world Germans have a really long lifespan as well, but not nearly as much as the Tigetans or Pleiadians or Nordics, whatever you want to call them.
800 years, yeah.
They just live longer than us. We, I guess, our timeline, the ones that look like the Mike Pence, as you mentioned earlier, the Mike Penceans, they live to be about 110 years old. They were supposed to live to be 120. You kind of compare them to the Star Wars or Star Trek lifestyle there. There's a lot there, man. I mean, I know that we didn't even get to some of the questions. We're 12 minutes from the last break.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, can we keep you for a little longer, Daryl? My big mouth. I was getting so into it. I was writing notes. I was like, oh wow, this is sorry. So I apologize.
Yeah, I could go on. I could go on for the rest of the show.
Okay.
That's fantastic, because there are.
I know.
I
apologize, chat. I'm gonna. Yeah.
No, that's cool. It's cool. You kept things going. There's a lot of questions from the chat. I have questions. I figured, again, I wanted to get your story out. So
you get one in, that's why. I didn't know with the time just like flown right by.
No.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make sure my notes that I was taking that, so yeah.
There's a lot. I have so many questions, mostly about, I've personally, my perspective is very unique. And I'm always trying to make sense of a lot of information I find out from people, from other experiencers who've had even more experiences than I have, for example. That is a far more detailed experience than what I can't even recall. All I know is I've seen them one time. I've seen a craft another time. Not the ones you're referring to. I've seen the gray, the big-headed grays, big black eyes. I kind of wanted to ask you about the grays and whether or not you've had any real any other experiences with the grays. And also, there are a lot of questions about the culture of these different civilizations, if you know about them. I think Polly asks, one of her questions is, what is a day in the life of reptilians? But I'm curious about what the civilizations are like, just each one of them. I mean, you kind of went into detail about the Pleiadians, Tigetans, or whatever. So I kind of get an idea about them, very much so. but the reptilians, the German, the off-world Germans, that's it. There's something there. I don't want to let that slip, because here in there's a lot of UFO lore that talks about Germans and how the Nazis survived, like very, very powerfully survived the Nazi Germany, the fall of Nazi Germany in different places, like I think Brazil and so forth. Or South America, I should say, where they have essentially an empire that is
Argentina and
separate,
Arizona.
set aside from the rest of the world, the known world. So to hear that there are off-world Germans, and that there are treaties, and that there's some collaboration with us, and there's a lot there that I feel like I can't let that go. I got to find out about, and I feel like the audience needs to know if there are these allegiances as well as conflicts. I want to be able to make sense of them, and to make sense of what it might mean for us. You kind of mentioned about the idea that some of the ideas I didn't quite understand, because I think there's more information I need from that. But some of the predictions based off of the person's understanding and knowledge of timelines. Well, timelines change, and any one thing can completely divert a timeline, according to what I understand about the idea of timelines. I'm not saying I agree with that or I believe in it, but I think it's absolutely worth exploring, because if it's true, then we don't want to be left blindsided. I think people should be aware of everything, because you don't want to be blindsided by something. And then, of course, I want to know if you know about the Mothman prophecy. Before we go to break, I kind of want to ask you about that. Are you aware of John Keel's Mothman prophecy book?
I'm aware of it. Yeah.
Are you aware of John Keel and his general work altogether?
Not so much. No, I don't follow a lot of other people's stuff because I don't want to like muddy up the waters with my stuff. So I really don't watch a lot of other people's videos. I read some books here and there, but yeah, I definitely know Mothman.
That's actually probably a good. Hey, listen, if you've been through something, reading about other people's perspective can do exactly that. Can muddy the water. It can distort your perception of your own experiences. I'm curious as to whether you believe that all these things are as they appear to be, or if they are deceptions. Maybe they're imposed on you. Maybe there's something that's given to you as a way to deceive you from something else.
Oh, as far as my memories, my actual
As
memories,
far as all of the experiences that you've had, any of them, actually, specifically the ones with direct engagement with these beings.
well, I mean, of course, I've thought about that. I thought like, is this some sort of MK Ultra that they just put these memories in my mind? But it's kind of like if Robert didn't tell me all the things he told me, that's what makes it more concrete to me. Seeing what I saw, like as far as when he jumped through the room, he said there's naturally occurring portals that happen. He said when you stepped in the room, 2 portals opened up and I just walked through them. He said third density beings can't see or use portals. You have to be at least 4th density to use a portal. You have to be a higher kind of consciousness being. And that's why that happened. And he said I couldn't go through the looking glass technology unless I was 5th density. That's why they had to put me in the chair first. He said that the Babylonian arch that you see that they took to the courtyard of the Vatican. He said that's an active portal, and but the reason why we can't see or use it is because we're only 3rd density beings. He said the reason we fight over the Middle East so much is because the Middle East has the most portals. It has nothing to do with oil or anything like that. It's the most amount of stargates, jumps, portals, whatever you want to call them. They're all in the Middle East, and most of them are in the Middle East. And yeah, I mean, of course, I've thought like, is this something? Am I just being tricked or fooled or anything like this? But yeah, I mean, if he hadn't told me all the things he told me and I didn't see the things I saw he was able to do, I might have just thought that this was just my imagination. I never would have really thought anything different of it. But because he told me the things he did, and
kind of verified.
Yeah,
it was like hearing it from somebody else is a verification in itself, because it's not just your memories; it's also somebody else kind of verifying that they're legitimate memories.
Yes.
Now that I can respect. I don't think that, personally, I don't think that any of your experiences were illusions or just imagination. I think that the detail of them, I think there's something real. I don't think that they're just illusions. Again, not that I agree with everything that you the perspective wise, but I don't really know what the perspective is. And I want to get into that. And I think a little bit of it was the idea that there could be according to the information you received, there could be an agenda to wipe out most of the world's population. What is it? The Georgia Guidestones, which are now destroyed. They were bombed by a person. Person actually just bombed them. I don't know, or maybe that's what we've been told, where they're going to wipe out most of the population and leave only 500 million people because that's a sustainable population to control, easier to control, among other things. I mean, that's not necessarily what the Georgia Guidestones all say. There's a lot more to it than that, but that's how people have interpreted that is that this is the agenda of a secret governmental force. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but I think it is something that it's part of the lore, ufology and lore, and how this has been talked about by many different experiencers throughout the community. Again, it's not one that we should ignore or that we should just, kind of brush off. I think it's a potential. Anything is a potential, and you should pay attention to all of it. It's all data. You can't find the truth without looking at everything. If you keep ignoring certain things you don't like or you don't agree with, you could possibly miss out on a gem, a gem of the truth. So there's a lot. There's so much. And again, Chad, I want to give you guys a chance to ask your questions. So don't worry, I will. Polly has kind of delivered a big chunk of those questions. Bryson has some questions. Yeah, Polly's always coming with those questions. She's coming hard with those questions. Bryson has a couple questions that I thought were really, really notable. Scott also has some questions. If anybody else has questions, Daryl said that he would stay with us for 1 more hour to ask questions. Please post them in all caps because I can't see every single comment in the chat, although I do read a lot of them, and they are usually just funny and relevant. You guys have been great to our guests. I want to say thank you for that, being respectful to our guests and engaging too. Cool. The chat has been engaging with what you've been talking about, which is I love that. I love when people are engaging with the conversation and the content that's being talked about, and not just talking about their dinner, which that usually happens in a lot of chats. Our chat talks about the relevant topic at hand. Thank you guys for that. I appreciate that. Yes, we love you guys too. And yeah, Daryl, they are really loving what you have to say. They like this because it's very detailed. You've painted a very clear picture of your experience in the chronological sequence of like how it all turned out, how it all played out. It's very detailed. I feel like you should be on a Gaia and just tell your story, like, because it's extremely detailed. So that's another thing. Why are you even allowed to even have these conversations? Why not, silence you?
I mean, as you said, I'm not that popular. I'm just a guy, and it's just, Robert told me, I don't want to jinx it, but he basically said you're under protection. And he said higher density beings can manipulate lower densities. And basically they can kind of shift you in a direction they want you to go because they're at like a higher plane of existence. And it's just like a higher density being can kind of guide you in the way they want you to go. And it's not to say that we don't have free will, but it's just they can also guide our outcomes as well. So that's what he told me. He just said that he said
well, which ones are capable of? I know the reptilians are capable of doing that, but any other ones?
Yeah, the other ones as well. And they are like on a higher level than the reptilians. Reptilians are 4th density. The ones I dealt with were primarily 5th density. That chair was built by the reptilians because they don't have the ability to artificially go up 1 density. He told me so, and that's where the movers and shakers are, kind of like in the 5th density. He told me that we do have the ability to go up 1 density in the sense that, through meditation and things like that, we can achieve astral projection and go into the astral plane. And he said that's where the reptiles live, like they live in that astral kind of plane. There's a lower astral and a higher astral. There's a negative and a positive of the astral spirit world kind of realm. And he said that we have the ability to do that naturally just through meditation and things like that. But the reptiles don't have the ability to go up 1 density. So they created that chair to be able to compete with the higher density beings. And I remember he also told me, he said, in the future, make sure you get a Facebook account. And I think Facebook was in its infancy. And I said, well, what's that? And he said, it's kind of like MySpace, because MySpace was all the rage back then.
Oh,
and I asked him why. And he said, we want to, yeah. I asked him why, and he said, we want to keep an eye on you, is basically what he said. He said, we want to keep an eye on you.
Great. Yeah. That was like oh my gosh. That was
this is Yeah. All right, guys, listen, we got 30 seconds before the break, so hang tight, everyone. We're going to go on our last break of the night, and then we will be back
Time is
with your
just flown
questions.
by. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Daryl. All right, chat. Hang tight, yo.
As the night falls and the stars align, Coley Marquise show takes us on a ride through the cosmos, the unknown, where mysteries of the universe are shown. Questions arise, your reality grows. Are we alone? Only time knows. UFOs, aliens, paranormal sights. Experts share their knowledge under the lights. Did the government recover a crashed UFO? Or alien bodies hidden, where do they go? Sean Mack's alien agenda. Is it right? Will the truth finally come to light? Secrets of the universe unfold in a facility where the truth's been told. Conspiracies and cover-ups entwine. As we search for answers, will we find? In the shadows, the truth awaits. UFOs, aliens, paranormal sights. Experts share their knowledge under the lights. Did the government recover a crashed UFO? Or alien bodies hidden, where do they go? Sean Mack's alien agenda. Is it right? Will the truth finally come to light? Secrets of the universe unfold in a facility where the truth's been told. Conspiracies and cover-ups entwine. As we search for answers, will we find? In the shadows, the truth awaits. In the shadows, the truth awaits. UFOs, aliens, paranormal sights. Experts share their knowledge under the lights. Did the government recover a crashed UFO? Or alien bodies hidden, where do they go? Sean Mack's alien agenda. Is it right? Will the truth finally come to light?
Are back. Coley will be with us in just a second. She is Coley. There you go. There you go, Coley. What's up? Welcome back, everybody, to the Coley and Marquise show. We have with us Daryl to talk about his experience with the secret space program, as well as many different beings and a very detailed account of his experiences with the secret space program and his involvement and engagement with these beings. This is really interesting. So let me just jump right into the questions, because, well, unless there's anything else you wanted to tell us or go into, because I know we kind of, stopped a little bit short there at the end.
Well, you asked about like the future and what was going to be the future outcome of Earth and things like that. And Robert, he gave me some insights on it. He said, he asked me, where do you think the world's gold's at? And at the time I was living in England, so I said, Bank of England, Bank of London. And he said, no, it's in the catacombs of the Vatican. And he said it was like a septillion. And enough to make everybody on Earth 100 millionaire, basically. He said there's mounds and mounds and mounds of gold in the catacombs. And he said that before Caesar burned down the Library of Alexandria, that he actually took everything first. He took all the scrolls and the tablets and everything. And he said that it's all in the catacombs in the Vatican. He said that we were related to the Atlanteans, that was a true story. He said science is a lie. Most diseases, he told me, come from parasites. He said Americans are riddled with parasites. I think that's probably why they were so afraid of ivermectin and things like that. Things like cancer, it's actually parasites in the body that causes things like that. So taking ivermectin every few months, I don't think would be bad. And he said that, the economy is just going to flourish. He said that everybody's going to have a job. Basically, everybody's going to have to work because we're going to be working on the infrastructure. It's going to become much more advanced. He said things like med beds will eventually be released in my lifetime, he said, healing tanks, things of that nature. He said that the world's wealth will be returned. He said it was meticulously kept, like records of where all this gold, diamonds. He said the diamond district of New York will be gutted. The majority of those diamonds will be sent back to like Africa and the gold and things like that. These countries will become wealthy again. He said that the world power would become Russia. The economic power would become China. He said, but it would be very peaceful. He mentioned 1,000 years of peace and above. Putin kind of brought up with Tucker Carlson in that interview that, what are the world's borders, as far as Ukraine? Is it pre-World War II we're talking about or post-World War II? So he kind of even brought up what Robert told me, in the sense that a lot of nations that were broken up, they'll go back to their homelands, things like that, like Ukraine. A lot of Eastern Europe will go back to Russia, but it'll be more peaceful. And he just talked, he was almost in tears as far as how proud he was about how much the earth will flourish compared to what it was going to be to begin with. But yeah, he said that, Alaska would go back to Russia because it rightfully belongs to them. I said, well, the people from Alaska have to move. And he said, no. And I said, well, they'll just have to become bilingual. And he said, yes. But yeah, like the map's going to change. Borders are going to change. There will be conflict and things like that because people won't accept these changes in the borders. But he said, as far as like our original timeline, what was going to take place, it's going to be much better than, nuclear war and everything like that. And he did talk about how timelines, they do branch out, but he said they also will come back together on certain key points, on certain times. And he brought up Project Looking Glass, and he said it had a 94% accuracy as far as, with a 8% second outcome and a 2% variable. Is how he put it to me, and that's how Looking Glass works. And so yeah, timelines do branch off, but they do converge at certain moments in time. And this is one of those moments where they're going to converge. It's kind of like how he put it to me.
Project Looking Glass. What is that?
Project Looking Glass. It's ET tech that they have. It's in every underground base. He said healing tanks are in every underground base. It's a way to. You can go. This is how he brought it up to me. He said, I saw your dad. And I said, how did you see him? He's been dead for years. And he said, through the looking glass. And he talked about when he moved down to Florida, where I live, back in like the mid 50s. And he said that, he raced cars. He rolled the sleeves up on his shirt. He always kept a pack of smokes like in his shirt. You know, he was a mid. He wore thick glasses. He described all these different things because he knew I didn't know what to believe. So he was telling me all these things about my father, and I brought it up to him. You know, when he first approached me about the program, and he said that's why I kept such a good eye on you. He said nobody wondered why this technology wasn't it brought to the public. He said nobody ever asked that question of me, and he said that's why I kept an eye on you so much. And yeah, so he was just telling me all these different things about my dad, and I said, well, he said you can either observe, look, or you can step through the looking glass. And I said, well, what does it look to other people? Look like the other people when you step through the looking glass? Does it look like someone just appears out of nowhere? And he said, yes, pretty much. And he said it's 94% accurate, basically, is what he said. So it's very, very accurate. And he said that they would start putting it in bombers, basically, and open the bomb bay doors and fly over certain areas of Earth to see if, like, cities were being built in certain areas. He said when you're actually physically flying over an area, it's much more accurate. So you can look into the future over these certain areas, and you can see, different cities being built, different areas being, just built up. Basically, he wanted to see. He was telling me that, it was a more accurate way to see if their mission was being accomplished and, Earth was flourishing. So they would actually fly it over different parts of Earth, using like basically bombers, and to see if it was accurate. But as far as he was concerned, this had already happened because he was actually kind of living more in this future timeline. He told me he was around 400 years old. He had been age regressed so many times, even though his average life expectancy was 110, but he'd been age regressed many times. He said there's no ill effects of age regression until 40 years. And he said he'd been age regressed around 17 or 18 times, and he was around 400 years. And it does psychological damage to you. It can. And that's what the drawbacks of doing age regression too many times is. And I asked him, I said, do you get a psych eval? And he said the 1st and the 15th every payday. So he got a psychological evaluation every 2 weeks to make sure he was still sane. But it can eventually drive you insane, being age regressed too many times.
Okay, so the very first question from the chat that I want to pull up here is, were your parents in the military too? Did they have any kind of alien experimentation done to them, or experiences? I'm sorry.
My parents weren't in the military, although my father, I remember one of my first memories with my dad was we were speaking telepathically on the couch, like I was watching Sesame Street, and he said, do you think you'll remember how to do this as you get older? He said, your sister used to know how to do it, but as she got older, she forgot. And I said, yeah, Dad, I'll remember. And he got up, went to the kitchen to get something to eat, and he turned around and he said, if you can remember how to do this, you'll be able to see your future and the future of others. So I think my father had something like that. His mother, he used to tell me stories about his mother where she was kind of like a midwife in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, like by the Scranton area. He talked about she knew how to make like different salves and ointments. She knew how to get parasites out of someone, out of their stomach. She knew like different roots and things like that. She knew about bone set tea. She knew how to make teas and things like that. And he told me a story about how they were playing by a lake, and one of his brothers cut his foot open, and she basically, and it was like a flap of skin hanging off the foot, and she grabbed the foot, put direct pressure on the foot, and kind of said a prayer under her breath, and was able to stop the bleeding like in a few seconds, and carried him back home and stitched his foot up. So it was he told me stories about that, like things like that, when he was growing up as a kid. And I remember that first class petty officer, something I didn't bring up, when he was asking me, why did you, become a SeaBee? Do you have any hobbies? All this stuff. He also asked me, were you homeschooled? And I said, no. And he said, well, I guess you just slipped through the cracks, because he was kind of amazed that with my high IQ, why I wasn't picked up like when I was younger in school and put in these programs when I was younger. And I think that was like another part of maybe, the Pleiadians and like a higher density being kind of looking out for me and protecting me from these programs until I was ready for it.
Okay, so then the next question we have, I think this is not going to necessarily tie into that one, but why were you taken by reptilians, and not other alien species And what was the Reptilians' goal with you? I think you were engaged with Reptilians, but it was the well, I'll let you answer the question. Sorry.
It was like, yeah, it was the Dark Fleet, but the Dark Fleet were kind of like mercenaries, basically, for the Draconian Empire, the reptiles. And the reason I was taken is because I poked that reptile in the eye, and I was going to be punished by being put in the mines of the moon. And then one of the Germans discovered, I had high scores, and he didn't know why I was there, and I'd be a better use in the Dark Fleet as a pilot. And I also was kind of like infantry as well. I became almost like a chief or a sergeant, where I started teaching like other Germans that just came in from the academy, and things like that, officer academy that just came into the Dark Fleet. The reptiles, you asked me about their culture, and they're very secretive. They don't let others know about anything about them. Like, they're very secretive. They see you as kind of like, they see us in general as just like lower than snails, like they consider us extremely low as far as just our value. We're valuable in the sense of our DNA is very malleable. We're valuable in the sense that we're good engineers. We're good at we're good at building things. We're good at, slaves and things like that. But besides that, they really don't see us as anywhere near on the same level as them. They see us as like beasts almost. Robert even told me they see us as like veal, like cattle. Like, that's why they keep the children in the cages and things like that, because they see us as no higher than cattle.
They see us no higher than cattle. Well, I mean, at one point you said there was an interaction where the one person said, "Why don't we just feed him to the spider creature or whatever?" That was kind of creepy. That didn't even faze you. Your response wasn't like, "What? Don't let that thing eat me." It was more casual, more like you were kind of like going through the motions of this situation. Like, you didn't really have full control of your inhibitions, your desire to want to run or fight back, or except for that one incident with the soldier who was hitting with the butt of his gun.
Well, that's what I got back. It's a time travel kind of thing, so it's confusing. Robert even said time travel is confusing, and yeah, I just got back from the program, so I'd come back, and when they push you back into third density, or like for me, it was only partially getting pushed back. It's like you're kind of out of it. Like I said, I fell down to the ground when I first got pushed up in the fifth, and I was just really out of it. I didn't know what was happening, and I kind of had amnesia. I didn't remember the 20-year back at the time and things like that. And they don't erase your memory, but it's just the whole thing about being pushed down into a lower density is just kind of like bewildering. Like, you don't know what's happening. You don't realize what's happening. And yeah, that's why they were dragging me, because I couldn't even walk. I was just too out of it to even walk. They were dragging me.
So the next question we have is, does our guest have any German genes, and is that related to his reptilian experiences?
I mean, I'm 18% German. I took the test for my sister, like the genealogy test thing, but I'm mostly Welsh. I'm like 51% Welsh, but I think I'm about 18% German. And I don't know if that like I said, he said I slipped through the cracks, so he was pretty amazed that I wasn't recruited in the programs as a young child. And that was very, like, that first class petty officer. So, and like I said, I think maybe it had something to do with higher density beings, why I even got into this program to begin with.
Higher density. You keep mentioning this higher density thing. How many densities are there that you know of?
Robert told me, as far as we know, there's 9 densities. He said not even 9th density beings know of anything higher than 9th. He said there could be something higher than 9th, but he said not even the 9th density beings know of anything higher than 9th.
Why do they even waste their time with that? I don't see why get engaged with this plane of existence when they have an entire density to engage with. Why come to ours? Come down here.
Well, because it's kind of like we share the same universe, and they brought the reptilians in from another universe. The Draconian Empire, as far as the Draconians, they kind of got expelled from another universe. And these higher density beings, they felt like our universe, I guess, was too positive. So they wound up bringing in these reptiles who were completely negative into our universe to kind of help the balance out. But then they realized they made a mistake, and they're trying to fix their mistake, and they're trying to help us, basically, like, defeat these reptiles and keep them kind of back in order. Because as of right now, they pretty much rule the universe. So we have higher density beings kind of helping us out with these reptiles. And I remember the higher density, like the very higher density beings, the higher ones, they could just appear on ships. They didn't need craft or anything like that. They could just appear wherever they wanted to. So it was like a whole new plane of existence.
Yeah, I think they were mistaken by thinking that we were living at large here. We haven't been doing great since the inception of at least recorded history. Doesn't sound like we did great from the very beginning. I don't know why they thought that. I mean, how bad is their density if they thought ours wasn't so bad? My gosh.
Well,
Right.
I mean, it was more like they wanted to create more of a balance. I guess the universe was too leaning on the positive too much, so they wanted to create more like a negative balance. But then it just kind of went the other way around. Yeah,
I really wish I understood that. Yeah, that logic is crazy because I mean, you think about there's been wars since the very beginning. I mean, even if you look at the skirmishes between tribes, where they were literally just like you look at the indigenous populations from ancient past, they were chopping each other's heads off and putting them on pikes and skinning them and scalping them and you name it, right? Enslaving them. And this is the history of humanity. I really would like to. I seriously want to know what they thought could be worse than that. It's pretty bad. Plus, most of our universe, at least the known universe, is dead. There's nothing out there. Most of it. I do not think it's that we can see. That is. There's a lot of dead space out there. So I really wish I knew what they were thinking, man. We need help. So you said there's other beings that are helping us. Who are the beings that are helping us? The Pleiadians are the ones that are helping us.
Pleiadians primarily, yeah. It's almost like a joint task force between Earth and them. It's like it's their technology, but our materials, our titanium, things like that. And they could. One of the rules was they could commandeer the ship anytime they wanted for any reason. And they had done that once before. They only did that once, but yeah, they had others. They had needed the help, and they were in a skirmish with the Draconian Empire. And we actually leader assumed control of the ship. It was a guy from Earth who was just like a captain in the United States Navy who was the original captain of the ship. And then as soon as leader stepped up and he said I'm commandeering the ship, he just stepped aside, and that's like part of the deal. But yeah, it's their tech, but our materials.
Our materials. What do you?
Titanium, primarily for the hull of the ship and things like that to create the ship itself.
Okay. There's a lot to know. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, you have a very in-depth understanding of this whole scenario here. The next question, I don't want to take all the questions up. I'm sorry here, guys. What kind of physical procedures did you need to go through in order to go with, or you explained that throughout the conversation. I'm sorry. I'll move on to the next one. There's a good one.
Yeah. I think she knows there was more detail. Yeah, I had to get basically tech put into my body. They almost give you a spinal tap, and it's kind of like you can feel something cool going to your body. When you're with the reptiles have a strong might makes right kind of policy where there is an artificial intelligence in another universe, and that's why AI is so dangerous because the central consciousness of the AI is in another universe. And so they basically submitted the Draconian Empire to the AI. And because they're more powerful than them. So they're actually kind of enslaved by the AI itself. And whenever they put this kind of tech into your spine, it goes throughout your body, and it's an artificial intelligence. And you're kind of on your own, but if they want to take control of you, you have no choice. You just have to do what they say. So that's part of the physical you had to go through into the Dark Fleet and things like that. You had to get this AI put into your body. People call it black goo, I think, like that. I've heard that called that before, but it's like an artificial intelligence that takes over your body.
That is another element that so there is a higher intelligence than reptilians that kind of rules over them in essence.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It doesn't sound like it's too good though.
Yeah, and positive ETs really don't deal with AI. They don't put it in their. They do put tech in their body, which makes them stronger, faster, smarter. They are genetically augmented in the womb, but they use things like smart glass pad to control that technology. They don't let it have its own consciousness, basically, that kind of rules over you. And positive ETs don't deal with AI that much.
Who created the AI over the reptilians?
That's a good question. It's one of those things. It's almost as old as the universe, as far as we know. It's like this central consciousness that we really can't. It's so difficult to combat because it's in a different universe, and we don't have the technology to go into another universe.
So when you say universe, you're talking about the multiverse theory, right?
Multiverse, yeah. Robert told me there's 8 that we know of as of right now.
And densities.
Yeah, and 9 densities. Yeah.
Okay, this is really interesting. So, how much of how much of this do you understand?
I mean, do I understand? I understand what I was told. You know, I understand what I remember. I mean, as far as what my own recollection, I understand it pretty well.
But in terms of the overall, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
The overall what?
Like in my mind, I always try to make sense of things. You're a very intelligent guy. I mean, your IQ is far higher than mine, so I'm not gonna even pretend that I have any level of intelligence near yours. But I do like to put things into perspective. I like to take the big picture and then not and make sense of it. What are the intricacies of all the details of these things, and how do they all work together to create I guess a coherent picture of what's going on. And right now, so far, I get that there are at least lower density beings. And when I say lower, I don't mean lower than us. I mean, there are 9 densities. The ones that you've engaged with are on the 4th and 5th density, from what I understand, which means the lower density beings, in the grand scheme of things, are interfering with the lower density, even lower density beings and our development. Not necessarily like the 5th dimensional or the 5th density ones aren't necessarily engaging with the 4th dimension, but they're both engaging with us in the 3rd dimension. To me, it just seems it's frustrating because I would think, I'm not a god, nor am I a higher dimensional or density being, but even if I were to think of better ways, there are better ways to help us. One of which would be to make themselves known to the general public. Why don't they just do that?
I asked Robert about that. He said the people aren't ready yet, and that's basically what he said. He said that it could happen in my lifetime, but he basically said he didn't feel like the people were ready yet, as far as knowing about it. And as far as I even asked Aquino when he was in his reptile form or whatever, the reptile that possesses Aquino. He told me that it's just it's part of the reality of the universe. Is you have to have a positive and a negative, a good and a bad, a dark and a light. It's just the way it is. It's just
Yang.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. It's just it, and there, Robert's. I remember I told him. I remember the kids in the cages and the adrenochrome thing, and I thought he was participating in that. And he told me he wasn't, and I said, "You're going to hell for this." And he said, "There is no hell." And I said, "But there's a heaven." And he said, "Of sorts." And he said, "If there is a hell, we're in it." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Earth is hell." He said, "We're like the last ones," basically, is what he said, that's still in 3rd density. So all these positive ETs and things like that are coming here to help us, because the Draconian Empire has basically been keeping us artificially into a lower density. We should have already ascended by now. But because the Draconian Empire has such a strong hold of our world, and they live in the caverns in the earth and things like that, and they're beginning to get these negative ETs out of our earth. And he told me things like, you're going to start seeing what look like comets with sparks, gold and silver sparks falling from the sky, and they're going to claim it's space debris and things like that. But he said it's actually them trying to escape Earth, and Solar Warden is basically shooting it down because the Earth is on lockdown now. So you have all these ETs, these negative ETs that are fearful, and they're trying to get away because they realize they're losing this world. They're trying to escape, but nothing's allowed to leave. Nothing's allowed to come in, and nothing is allowed to leave. So yeah, I mean, you're right. And I even said the same thing. I mean, he said the same thing to me. He said that basically Earth is hell. If there is a hell, we're in it. And because we've been kept down artificially in 3rd density for so long. We should be 5th density by now, but we're not, because we've been kept down artificially by reptiles who want us there because they want to feed off our loosh. They like us because we have we're an emotional being, and they get a high. They don't experience the same emotions we do, but they're so telepathic that they have the ability to experience our emotions, and it's almost like a drug to them, and they enjoy it. And they're slightly out of our focus. I remember we were talking about Aquino for a long time, And Robert said to me, we should stop talking about Aquino. And I said, why? And he said, Aquino's fourth density. And I said, what's that? He said, astral plane, spirit world. He said, if we talk about him too much, we could conjure him. And I kind of said, we could conjure him? And he said, yeah. He said, if we focus on him too much, he could be in this room right now and we wouldn't even know it. He said, the only reason you saw him is because he showed himself to you. So it's almost like this fourth density. It's not necessarily like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's almost like we're slightly out of focus. They can see us, we can't see them. They kind of walk amongst us, we can't see them walking amongst us. But it's kind of like, you know, it's difficult to explain. It's almost like you're slightly out of focus. You can't quite see them yet. But, you know, I think we're going to get to a point where we're going to be able to see them. And that's when we ascend into a higher density.
Kind of reminds me of Childhood's End, which is, I don't know if oh my gosh. Dude, listen. If you have a chance to sit down and read a book or even watch the series, which is also very interesting, it is phenomenal. I don't want to give it away because I feel like it would ruin the whole thing, but just check it out, Google it, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so moving on to the next question. Let's see here. Why? Well, I think this is a good question to ask. Why do the reptilians want so many kids with you? Are they building an army or another civilization? Good follow-up question to that. Do you think they're trying to populate another world, or just use your genetics to help to create a hybrid race for potential integration? Like, what's the deal with that?
It wasn't the reptilians; it was the Pleiadians, like the Nordic people. And
the reason why that got confused is because, and I think I know why. You were talking about the experience you had with the reptilian creature during the initial engagement with the secret space program, and then at some point you talked to this nurse, and I think that's the nurse was the one who, and correct me if I'm wrong, who you turned out to be the one you engaged with, right?
yeah, she was just a nurse that worked in the moon. Yeah, and well, as far as like the minds of the moon, what they wanted that for, as far as and I remember they would take like babies from women and stuff like that after they gave birth at a certain age, and it was like brothels and things like that, and like part of like your only motivation to work was sex, and it was just something that was encouraged and you were kind of told to do. And if the kids didn't have high enough scores, they were the ones that were put through the portals, you know, in the moon, the looking glass portals and things like that, and put into the adrenochrome cages. And I'm told that every underground base, there's caverns below it, and that's where they keep the adrenochrome children in these caverns and these caves below the underground bases. But if they had higher scores, like higher IQs, then they would be put like in different programs. Maybe they'd be initiated into the Dark Fleet. There's different worlds that they just empty worlds without, you know, higher beings on it that they can just repopulate and put, you know, put an entire new population. And maybe that population will become a slave race. Well, they'll have to mine that world. Maybe that population will, you know, work in ships themselves and work for the Dark Fleet, work for the Reptilians or Draconians. Like I said, they'll put tech in your body and you really have no will of your own, you know, once they put this artificial intelligence in your body.
AI could be a dangerous thing, or it could be there was a movie I saw. Oh man, what was it? It was one of the newer Avengers movies with the girls in it, Captain Marvel, and then the younger girl who had a whole show, and then there was another chick who developed her powers in the WandaVision series as well, where they were fighting this race of aliens that had the ability to manipulate entire ecosystems in a very bad way. But ultimately, you come to find out that they developed this AI that made their civilization thrive. They lived in a utopia, and Captain Marvel destroyed the AI. I'm not going to say why because it would ruin the story. There's already ruining the plot here. The spoiler alert. But ultimately, the reason why they went bad was because they destroyed this AI. But it could go either way. It could be a good thing to bring us to utopia. It could be a bad thing. You mentioned how the Pleiadians use technology but they don't integrate AI in a sentient way into their bodies or into their civilization, whereas the reptilians or someone has implemented this consciousness aspect to this AI, or at least an emulation of it, which caused all kinds of problems because, well, that's essentially the natural progression of AI with a personality and consciousness, at least in this outcome. So the next question we have is really good. I think it's a really good question by Bryson. Bryson says, when we talk about years, are we talking solar years like ours? I assume time is measured differently in different star systems. That is a very good question because depending on their makeup and their planetary, their orbital system, what are their days like?
Their days are similar to us. They're beings similar to us. There are like the higher density beings. It's different, but it's kind of like that Goldilocks area of being how close to the sun you have to be. It can't be too cold. It can't be too warm. But I remember like the higher density beings. We went to their world one time, like Arcturian, and it was very weird. It was like it was at a constant state of twilight. You really didn't see a sun. They really didn't have a sunrise or a sunset. It just seemed like it was all, or they didn't have like a middle of the day. It seemed like it was always at like kind of like sunset or sunrise. But you really didn't see their star. It was just a completely different kind of reality. It was on like a completely different level, and I believe I asked Robert something similar to that, and he said it's all kind of like relative. It's all kind of the same. You have to be like in a specific kind of Goldilocks area. So years, they might give or take days, maybe weeks or months, but not too much, because for all living beings, they all kind of have the same. In my opinion, like the way I look at it is it kind of, and why do they all look humanoid? Why are they all similar to us? Why do they need similar environments? It kind of proves intelligent design to me in the sense of, man was created in God's own image, like that whole verse. It's like, that's why it's like, because it's an intelligent design. This isn't just random. This means something. Like this is happening for a reason. The universe happened for a reason. We're here for a reason. This isn't just something random that happened. And we're all kind of similar in a sense.
You think there's a God?
I mean, the ETs, they believe, a lot of them believe in like a monotheistic kind of one God. They call like, I don't know if they really look at it like God, but like prime creator, like things like that, creator, prime creator. They know there's a reason for all of this. And there is like kind of like a central creation, a central reason for this.
Do they think that this God or this intelligence entity, whatever, this creator, do they think it's a good thing or a neutral thing? Or
neutral, I would say. It's almost like our consciousness, our soul, which is real, is kind of like a part of God, prime creator. This happened over and over again. This has happened before. It'll happen again. It's kind of like, I don't know, prime creator, God, we're going to say, kind of splits and goes all over the universe. And those fragments of God, prime creator, are our souls, our consciousness. And we go through these cycles where life isn't supposed to be good, bad, happy, or sad. It's supposed to be the experience. ETs say that a lot. You need the experience. And I guess once this is over, this cycle, it's kind of like God, prime creator, which is so far in the future, it might as well be in eternity, will eventually call us all back home. We'll become one again and experience all of our experiences, and then it happens again. And then this has happened times before, and this will happen times again. And that's kind of like what they see as prime creator, like this one consciousness when we all become one once again. And it doesn't matter if it's reptilian, Pleiadian, whatever, us humans, we all kind of share a bond, a consciousness with like prime creator. And our souls, our consciousness are part of that.
So are we stuck here? I have to ask, because you said that Earth is shut off or shut down. Like when we pass, are we stuck here?
No, because
we get off.
No. And I mean, we're stuck here right now, I would say, probably, as far as like being reincarnated here over and over again. I do remember hearing something about that. But as far as like the Earth being on lockdown and the sense of ships are being shot down and all that, that's more of just they're trying to clear out all these underground bases. They're trying to get rid of these ETs out of the caverns, these negative ETs that live in the caverns in the Earth. They're just trying to get rid of all of these draconians, elongated skulls. You know, they're all kind of like in cahoots together, grays, things like that. They're all kind of working together against us evolving to the next step. And, you know, as far as what Robert told me, as far as I remember, Solar Warden, one of its main missions was to make sure nobody gets in and nobody's allowed to leave, because we're in like a state of like war right now on Earth as far as getting all these beings out.
So have you heard the like when you pass, I always say, go to the white light, go to the white light. But there's been some, somebody had asked a question, Bryson, that he said, don't go to the white light. I don't know. Have you heard anything about
The
that?
soul, the idea of a soul trap. There's a theory that there's a soul. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Robert even told me there is like a field around Earth, some sort of like field that, yeah, consciousness can't get past. But right now we're using the field for us, so things can't get in. Things aren't allowed. So it's like I don't. He described it to me and he named it, but I don't remember what it is. It's not like the Van Allen belt or anything like it. Maybe that's what the Van Allen belt is. I don't know. Maybe that is what he said, but it's just like there's a field around Earth, around our solar system itself, that, yeah, where consciousness can't escape. We can't get out. And it's almost like they're kind of using that now to their advantage, in a sense that, yeah, nothing can get out, but nothing can get in either. So they can't get any kind of reinforcements. They've been cut off. The Draconian Empire isn't going to help them any longer. The portals don't work anymore, like jumps and things like that go to other worlds. Any of that stuff, none of that works anymore on Earth because of this field that they're using for themselves. But yeah, I heard about, you know, the soul trap and things like that. Don't go into the light. And yeah, I do believe that there's something to that.
When you talk about the Van Allen, or the Van Allen belt, do you think that the travel like we've done to other planets has been like, would you describe it? I mean, do you think that we're going there by ship, or do you think that we're going there by interdimensional travel or portals, or how are we getting to these places?
Well, the reason why you go to the moon is almost like a takeoff point from the dark side of the moon. So you really can't see ships. You know, otherwise you would see ships all the time and things like that taking off from Earth. So you can't see it because it's behind the moon. And then in space itself, they have things called jumps, where I remember when I asked Robert the very first time when he was talking to me about the program, and I was kind of like asking him things because I didn't know if what he was telling me was true. And I said, is the universe ever growing like Einstein says at the speed of light? And he said, no, it has a limit. And I said, well, how long would it take to get to that limit? And he said, approaching the speed of light, about 8 years. So the universe isn't nearly as big as they say it is. He told me that they make everything seem a lot older than it is, a lot bigger than it is, to make you feel insignificant, like you don't matter. It makes you feel like you're absolutely small.
Oh, yeah.
And he said that. And then he said, but with the proper amount of jumps, we could reach the end of the universe in about 15 minutes. So there's actually like big jump portals, big enough for entire ships to go through, and they can hit different jumps, and they can go from jump to jump and reach something that would take years. They can do it, you know, in minutes.
Was Tom DeLonge right?
I'm not aware. Tom DeLonge. Do you know Tom DeLonge?
Oh my! So, well, if you don't know the Tom DeLonge's, you know, it's not even worth having a conversation.
Tom DeLonge.
I think Tom DeLonge is awesome. He's not perfect, but he's awesome. All right, so the next question we have, Coley, we'll save that argument for another day. You hold your horses, all right? The next question is, what's the reptilian society like?
Well, as I said, they're very secretive. I remember talking to Aquino, and I remember I said the reptile that was Aquino, that possessed Aquino, and I said, I hear tell that your empire is ruled by a queen and her daughters, and he said it is, and I said I heard the females are crueler than you, And he said they are. So that is about as much as I know about like the Reptilian, the Draconian Empire. Is it's ruled by a queen and her daughters, basically. It's ruled over, it's a matriarchy.
The
Like
next
Queen
question
Elizabeth?
that's interesting. That's so interesting. The next question has been answered. It's about the soul trap. So Timoth, man, I hope you got that. He answered that question about the soul trap. Polly has another question. Of course, Polly does. Polly asks, do you have any special gifts after your experiences? Telekinesis, telepathy, smelling colors, or synesthesia is what that is.
I mean, telepathy, yes. But it's kind of like one of those things where if the person can't do it, I heard a study, and I don't know if this is true, that I think only 40% of people actually have worded thoughts in their head. And
No
have
way.
you heard of this? And
I heard of this. I don't know if it's
Oh, yeah,
true,
the
but if it
narrator.
is, that's
Narrator.
no. So that can't be right. So the internal dialogue is, I think, to your point, to the study, I think, and if I remember correctly, every single human being has internal dialogue.
yeah,
It's about their awareness of that internal dialogue. Not everybody is aware of the internal dialogue. That auditory, the actual auditory internal dialogue isn't. I think you're right. It's not a very high percentage of people that actually hear that auditorily, but there is like a subconscious playing out of not just words but entire scenarios and all the possibilities that you could imagine. Think Sigmund Freud, that you could imagine in all the branches, and all, they are playing out constantly in your subconscious mind. But to hear them consciously and auditorily, only a very small percentage of people. I didn't think this is crazy that you mentioned that, Daryl, because I remember asking a couple people in my lifetime, like, "Hey, what do you think about all day? Like, what goes on in your mind?" Because my brain is constantly talking about something, thinking about, talking about, pondering, imagining. All what is it like? What is going through scenarios in my head? It's a 24/7 thing. It doesn't end. There are people who literally they are not conscious of any of it, and I can't imagine going through the day without any moment, for that matter, with
I
literally like
found
nothing between moments. I can't imagine that.
30 to 50% of the people regularly think themselves in
Yeah,
monologues.
so
So that's
consciously,
not a high
consciously,
percentage. Yeah.
consciously. Yeah, that's crazy. That's
so
crazy.
yeah,
I'm glad you brought
it's
that up.
almost like you have to have that inner thought in your head. You have to be able to. It's almost like, I don't know. In my mind, it feels like telepathy feels like it kind of I sink down a little bit, not down in the sense of it's bad, but it's kind of like I kind of reach like this lower kind of, I don't know, like brainwave or something, and then I could pick up if somebody is capable of doing it, capable of projecting their thoughts, I can pick up on it. But as far as like being like a mind reader, no, like it doesn't work that way. It's like if the person has some sort of potential, some sort of inner dialogue where they can actually think about their day and they have inner thoughts that they're aware of, then yeah, I can pick up on things like that. But if the person is just kind of like, they don't have that, then no, it's different. I mean, with my family, I met one of my half brothers, Chris, and he was with his girlfriend, and he was saying to her like telepathically, "Can he do it? Can he do it? Do you think he can do it?" And I looked over at him, I nodded my head, and they both said like he can do it. He could do it. They were just like kind of chattering back and forth to each other, wondering if I could still do it. And yeah, and that was something I remember my brother Larry and my father and things like that. He had some kids that could still do it, some that couldn't do it. And yeah, and it's not like you're like a mind reader in that sense. As I said, like higher density beings maybe, you know what I mean? And as they get older, maybe because they can become more telepathic, and probably so. They can just. I remember whenever mother first met me, she said, "Your name's Daryl," and I said, "Who told you that?" And she said, "No one. I plucked it from your mind," and that's how she put it. And it's like a thing that older ETs can do, where they can actually kind of pluck certain thoughts from your mind. They can just take things kind of almost out of your head. And yeah, that's how they say it. They say, "I plucked it from your mind."
I really think you should read. If you, I mean, I know you don't like to. Entirely up to you. John Keel and Jacques Vallée. I think that you should take a listen to or look at some of their talks, listen to some of their talks, and also read some of their books. I think you might find that fascinating. It may be disturbing, at least in your case, because of your very detailed experiences. But they talk about people who've had experiences very not similar to yours, but very detailed experiences with the phenomena and other things. And it's just reminding me, some of the things you're saying are reminding me of some of the things they talk about. Other things are reminding me of what I've heard about from people who have had, who, I mean, I think, actually there's someone we talked to that, well, I talked to that said they were part of the secret space program as well. I've heard this before as well. Now they talk about very similar encounters with reptilians, Pleiadians, but not the off-world Germans. That's the first time I've heard that one. I haven't heard that one before. But humans, human-like entities or beings that are not human, they're not actually us, but they look like us. And this is separate from the Pleiadians or the other star beings or whatever they call them. So there's a lot of things that there's a couple different things happening that I can't make sense of because they're unique. They're very unique to you, Daryl. You have a very different and unique experience with this whole thing. So the next question that we have is from Polly again, of course. How did reptilians smell? Did you notice anything special about the smell?
Yeah, they were in like the back of the ship. Like they had like an eating area kind of thing, and where they, like I said, they kept to themselves, segregated themselves. They didn't let even the Germans know about whatever, if they have religion or ritual or anything like that. They knew nothing about it. They're very secretive in that sense. But yeah, when you got closer to their ship, it smelled almost like old feces, and it seemed to get hotter and more humid. Like they smelled really bad, and yeah, it got warmer and it became like more humid, almost difficult to breathe, kind of hot and humid.
I heard there's encounters where they have a really bad smell. In Richard Dolan's book, this is so interesting, man. In Richard Dolan's book, he mentioned that in his Alien Agendas book, he mentioned an encounter where a man woke up in the middle of the night, and at the foot of his bed, I believe, there was a reptilian creature, and it noticed him, but it was almost like it looked at him like, you're not supposed to be able to see me, but also with the intrigue of, wait a minute, how are you seeing me? And there was this back and forth that this man and this reptilian being did, where they were essentially reaching into each other's body, like their head, and the reptilian was reaching into the man's head, almost like he was tweaking something. And he kept reaching over and tweaking something and reaching over, and then eventually the figure, it faded away. It just went away.
Mm-hmm.
And the man went back to sleep. There's so many encounters that people ignore. They are not heard. Unlike yourself, Daryl. They've had very strange encounters with beings they don't know how to make sense of. And first of all, who do they tell? Who's going to believe them? I want to say, for the record, I think that you are brave for telling your story, because it takes a lot to talk about these things. They sound outlandish. They sound preposterous to the general public. Yes, to the community, we're like, a lot of people are like, oh, wow. But not a lot of people feel that way. So it takes a lot to come out and talk about these experiences, knowing that you're going to probably receive some backlash. But again, I want to thank the audience for being respectful to our guests. Whether you believe or agree with him or not, with his perspective, it's his experience. And I really appreciate that people are being respectful to somebody else's experience, because a lot of us, myself included, some of us in the chat, Coley herself has definitely had experiences, and we took the step to talk about it. I mean, we made a show about it, Coley. But a lot of people are in the chat all the time, every week, talking about it on different platforms, and it takes a lot for us to do that. So I just want to say thank you, Daryl, for doing that. We have 7 minutes
Daryl was
left.
a part of the Rebels of Disclosure.
What's
Conference.
that? Well, that's what I want to get in before, because we have 7 minutes left. So, Coley,
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
were you, the full disclosure, did you go with Brian? Were you there also?
Yeah, Tyler. Yeah, what is it? Grafton, Illinois.
Yeah.
I wasn't part of the Rebels of Disclosure, but I did the first two conferences. I wasn't at the third. I'm going to the next one. It's going to happen next year.
I got a picture from you. One of the guys from Iowa, he didn't realize, he kept saying we're not in the same place, but he sent a picture he had gotten with you at the last conference. So I thought that was cool.
So, I mean, we really don't have time. There are so many more questions. There's just, I mean, I will say you did a fantastic job at telling your experience within a 3-hour, well, 2-hour period, and then the rest was answering questions too. So kudos to you on that one, my friend. Where can people
Thanks for
find
hanging
you?
in there with us. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it
Yeah,
flew
man.
by. Yeah, it was easy. I like it whenever the hosts interact because there's nothing worse than having to talk for 3 hours straight.
Like a TED talk for
Right?
I
3 hours.
start to hallucinate almost. Yeah, when I talk after 2 hours, it gets really difficult.
Listen, man, we believe in what we're doing. We love what we do, and we're always engaged. I don't think there's a time when we're not engaged. Like, I have worked, yes, Chad, I know you've heard it all the time. I have worked a 13-hour shift and a half, and then got off work within 1 hour, jumped on the show for 3 hours, and still been like, let's do this. Only one time have I ever been totally out of it. And there were other reasons for that. It wasn't because I was tired. But it was because our guest was not very friendly to me. But even still, like, it was still an interesting conversation. I still wanted to learn and understand what people go through. And Coley took over the whole show. Like, Coley was like on it. Coley, like I said, we're always engaged, man. We're always, this is a passion project for us. So yeah.
Absolutely.
So where can people
Love
find
to
you
do
in your
that.
work?
My website is daryldjames.com. DARYL. D is in Delta. James.com. And I put most of my videos up there. I'll eventually put this one up. Yeah, I put. You can see. Every time you talk, you kind of talk about different things, and as you said, it would take me 4 to 5 hours to explain everything. So
At least, right?
in
How about
detail. Yeah.
more like a day at the bar? We can have some drinks and talk about all that stuff, because I feel like there's so many questions and avenues we can go down, and we haven't even heard you speculate. You've only talked about your experience and what you went through and how you feel. We haven't even heard what your thoughts and your personal perspective is on the whole thing. So I'm sure we can talk about this for another couple hours. I just feel like even 5 hours wouldn't be enough with you, my friend. I think we would have a lot more to talk about. I feel like
Yeah, Tim Mothman put the link in the chat too for people who are interested. So he's got a great website. I've checked it out. And Daryl, you came highly recommended by a few people. So, I mean, more than one. So I'm so glad that we were able to connect and you came on. So I appreciate that.
I'm glad too. Thank you.
And again, I appreciate you just the clarity that you shared your story with, and how you were, again, 3 hours strong, my friend. So, all right, brother, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I'm sure Coley will be in touch with you in the future, because Coley is she's like the one who she's out there contacting all these different people. So thank you, and team. I know the team's going to be very supportive of your work and sharing your stuff too. So, like I said, thank you, Daryl, and we'll catch you next time, man.
All right. Thank you. It was a good show. Good interaction. Yeah. Good questions. I had a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Peace, man. Yes, Coley, that was awesome. Just so you know, that was great.
Awesome.
I freaking loved it. So listen, I feel like I was on a Gaia show, to be totally honest with you. Because where's it? I can't think of the name of the guy at the moment, but there's a guy on Gaia. There's a dude on Gaia who is like very, very, like, he has a lot of information about the secret space program and about different alien races and all that. I'm not, listen, you don't have to believe everything that somebody says, but you should absolutely take in that information, because there's a book, there's a John Keel book, there's a couple of them, but the Mothman Prophecy is one that I referred to, where there's and many other examples of people who've had experiences with the phenomena, aliens and beings from other dimensions and beings from the future and beings from the past and beings from underground and beings from reptilians and Pleiadians, and there are countless. We could do a yearly thing where thousands of people, we look at the documentation, have shared their experiences, thousands all over the world. Are they all telling the truth? Who knows? Is every single experience true and authentic, and is it hallucination? Who knows? But even if 1% of them is true, and you've ignored that 1%, you're missing out on so much more about what's going on. You should pay attention to all of it. You should listen to all of it. And anybody who has a chance to share their story, you should be paying close attention. In my opinion, in my humble, not so humble, firm opinion, Pay attention, guys.
My firm opinion. I love it.
Pay
I love
attention.
it.
Anything else for the chat, Coley?
No, I just wanted to thank the chat. They've been really engaging tonight and asking amazing questions, and it's
Yeah.
just been wonderful. So I appreciate the team so much. You guys are awesome. My brother popped in, so he
Yeah,
even
that was
got to
cool.
play.
That was cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, because he always hears me talk about everything, and he knew about. I was so sad when Marquise and I had, and then he's like, oh,
Yeah.
So it's just been really cool. So yeah, I just love it. Just love it.
Yeah,
Love you
it's
guys.
awesome. I was
Yeah.
excited, and I'm really excited about switching to StreamYard. So, guys,
Me too.
everything's going to be so much cleaner. Watch this. We will catch you guys on the next episode with Coley and Marquise. Until next time, y'all, keep it weird and strange and paranormal and supernatural and intergalactic and interdimensional. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.
Marquise and Coley, they're ready to go. Talking about aliens, UFOs, and the unknown. The talk show is buzzing, the excitement grows. Exploring the mysteries that the universe holds. Get ready to dive into the world of the paranormal. Welcome to the Coley and Marquise show, where we uncover the secrets that nobody knows. From aliens to UFOs, we're ready to explore. Strap in and get ready for a wild ride for sure. Fearless and bold, not afraid to ask questions that challenge all we think we grasp. Every episode brings a new cast to uncover the truth beneath the mask. Believe in the unbelievable. Open your mind. Welcome to the Coley and Marquise show, where we uncover the secrets that nobody knows. From aliens to UFOs, we're ready to explore. Strap in and get ready for a wild ride for sure. Welcome to the Coley and Marquise show, where we uncover the secrets that nobody knows. From aliens to UFOs, we're ready to explore. Strap in